The most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Very good afternoon, everybody. Happy Friday. It's just gone 3 p.m. and you are with me right here on GB News. Here's what I've got for you this hour. Is Britain full? That's what I want to know. Net migration for this year is predicted to hit 1 million. I'm sorry, but it's getting absolutely ridiculous now. Who are these people? Where are they all coming from? What jobs are they all doing? Where are they all going to live? We're going to be talking about this a lot today, ladies and gentlemen. Where is the line? Is Britain full? Moving on, we're also going to be talking about this as well. Another big story for us. Are Philip Schofield's days numbered as your ITV host? And I wonder why they could be, if indeed they are. We'll be getting a little bit of inside info on all of that. And now, apparently, you're not allowed to call cons. Supposedly it's anti-PC and it's offensive to call convicts. Who knew? What next? Anyway, and to wrap us all off, a little bit of light relief. Godspeed, that's right, this paradigm of virtue in a dark and bleak existence, Archbishop Justin Welby, apparently, he's been done for speeding. So if you can't have a laugh about that, you can't laugh about anything. Patrick Christys here on GB News. Get your emails coming in thick and fast. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Those net migration figures already for this year, they're predicted to be 750,000. In the year coming, that's going to be supposedly 1 million. I'm sorry, but this is getting absolutely ridiculous now. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Now, though, headlines with Rhiannon.
Patrick, thank you. Good afternoon. It's 1 minute past 3. Your top stories from the GB newsroom. Passengers are facing widespread disruption today due to the latest round of train strikes. Members of the ASLEF union are walking out at more than a dozen train operators in a long-running dispute over pay. Tomorrow, RMT members go on strike on the day of the Eurovision Song Contest final in Liverpool. Further strikes by the union will be held on May the 31st and June the 3rd, the day of the FA Cup final at Wembley. Rail Minister Hugh Merriman told GB News the strikes are disappointing.
We have been able to facilitate an offer which has been put to the union leaders. The problem we've got is that they won't put it forward to their members. Similar offers have been put forward to other members of unions and they've accepted them. So logic would dictate if the union leaders did the same, we could see an end to this action. And I'm really sorry for all passengers who have been disrupted today.
Meanwhile, Rishi Sunak says he's disappointed with the decision to block Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky from addressing the Eurovision Song Contest. The block's due to concerns from the organisers that an address could politicise the event. The Ukrainian president wanted to urge the global audience to continue supporting his country against Russia's invasion. The European Broadcasting Union says it's against the rules. The UK economy grew slightly in the first 3 months of the year, but contracted in March, according to official figures. Growth of 0.1% was recorded by the Office for National Statistics in the first quarter, but in March, the economy shrank by 0.3%, mostly driven by a fall in retail and car sales as well as ongoing strike action. Chancellor Jeremy Hunt says although the slight growth is a positive step, there's more work to be done.
Well, these are much better figures than anyone would possibly have predicted, even 3 months ago, and that's partly because of what the Governor of the Bank of England said yesterday, measures in the budget that are helping to help companies to recruit, tackle some of the underlying problems in the economy. But there is still much work to do. We still have inflation that is much too high. That's causing a lot of pressure for families up and down the country. That's why we've got to stick to our plan to get inflation down, to get growth up, and to get the economy motoring in the way that we all want.
The Archbishop of Canterbury has been convicted of speeding in London. Justin Welby was ordered to pay £510 and given 3 points on his licence for exceeding a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit last October. The hearing was held on the same day he made a rare intervention in the House of Lords, condemning the government's plans to tackle the small boats crisis as morally unacceptable. A Lambeth Place spokesperson says the Archbishop was aware of the speeding offence but hadn't been notified it had gone to court. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer has insisted his party takes allegations of sexual harassment extremely seriously. It follows reports an internal investigation into one case of groping claims took 3 years to complete. In a separate case, a Labour MP's reported one of her party colleagues to the police for alleged sexual assault. Sir Keir Starmer's urging anyone within the party with concerns to come forward.
Well, look, I think all of these allegations have to be taken extremely seriously, and they are taken seriously by me and by the party. I do understand from my experience as Chief Prosecutor how difficult it is for people to come forward. That's among the reasons that we made our process completely independent, so it's not a political process anymore. But what I would say is that I encourage anybody to come forward and to feel that they're supported through that independent process.
And some breaking news in the last few minutes. A man has been convicted of the 1992 murder of 7-year-old Nikki Allen in Sunderland. 55-year-old David Boyd was wearing a T-shirt saying, "I am unstoppable," during one of his police interviews. Until now, he'd escaped justice. Northumbria Police first prosecuted the wrong man, who was then cleared after a trial in 1993. More on this story as we get it. Royal Mail's chief executive is to step down. Simon Thompson will leave the role in October after 2 years in the job. The announcement comes just weeks after agreeing a deal with the Communication Workers Union, bringing an end to a year of postal strikes. He says it's the right time to hand over to a new CEO. Pakistan's ex-Prime Minister Imran Khan is to be released on bail for 2 weeks. The decision from the High Court in Islamabad comes a day after the Supreme Court ruled his arrest on corruption charges was illegal. The events earlier this week have sparked unrest in the country, with almost 2,000 people arrested so far. Imran Khan denies any wrongdoing. And astronomers led by the University of Southampton have spotted what they believe to be the largest cosmic explosion ever seen. It's more than 10 times brighter than any other recorded exploding star, known as a supernova. And to date, it's lasted more than 3 years. Most are only visibly bright for a few months. Researchers say these events are very rare and nothing on this scale has ever been witnessed before. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens now, though. It's back to you, Patrick.
Happy Friday, everybody. Now, we start today with an absolutely shocking story, although it should take a very huge amount to be shocked by anything immigration-related in this country at the moment. But net migration to the UK this year could be 1 million. That is pretty much double last year's figures, and it makes an absolute mockery of the claim that leaving the European Union would give us back control of our borders. More than 45,000 migrants arrived on small boats in 2022. More than 6,800 have already crossed the Channel this year. But that is just a tiny fraction of the total number of people who are settling in the UK each year. And for me, there are some pretty pertinent questions here, OK? When is enough. Who are all of these people? Where are they coming from? Where are they going to live? What jobs are they going to do? When I saw this figure that was rumoured that we're going to have around 1 million people net within the next year, initially I was quite happy because I assumed, great, our NHS will be well staffed, we won't be short of doctors, we won't be short of anyone to work in our public sector. But I think we all know that that still won't be the case. And this, to me, leaves a huge amount of unanswered questions. I know that they say that we pump up the figures by accepting Ukrainian refugees, Afghan refugees and genuine refugees from across the world. Fine, but that's nowhere near 1 million, is it? Then you add up the students. OK, all right, so that's quite a large number. But it doesn't get to 1 million. And when do we have to say enough is enough? GBViews at gbnews.uk. I'm joined now by GB News' political reporter, Olivia Utley. Olivia, this is absolutely bonkers. What on earth is going on if indeed we do hit the 1 million mark?
Well, yes, I mean, the 1 million mark is, that's what some experts are predicting. That is definitely on the upper end. But what we are certainly going to see is a big, big rise in immigration figures. As you said, last year, the record high immigration figure was 504,000. This year is expected to be close enough, double that. What appears to be going on is, although we have seen a slump in the number of EU nationals coming to the UK since Brexit, that has been more than compensated for by the number of people coming over here, escaping war zones, students, and this is the important bit, their dependents. Now, if you're doing, for example, a 1-year master's degree in the UK, you are entitled to bring up to 6 family members. I'm
just going to cut across you because apparently I have a slight issue with your microphone, so I'll just go to my other guests for the moment, Olivia. But look, there are, of course, a huge amount of stats that are doing the rounds at the moment about this. So I just want to give you some stats on this, all right? So let's just look how net migration has rocketed down the years. In 1992, when John Major's Tories won the election, net migration was 49,000. In 1997, when New Labour took power, that was up to 107,000. And by the time Labour were voted out, the annual figure was 294,000. David Cameron promised to reduce net migration to the tens of thousands, but in 2016, which was the year of the Brexit referendum, net migration was 369,000. And in the 12 months up to June 2022, it was 504,000. Aside from the issues that I've just raised right at the start of this show, which are, let's be honest, who are these people, where exactly are they coming from, where are they going to live, what jobs are they going to do, I am also quite concerned about the changing demography of Britain. What will this mean for what Britain actually looks like going forward? I'm just going to get a little bit more of the political reaction for Olivia first. Olivia, I believe you're back in the room, as it were. Right, OK, so you think that the 1 million mark is at the top end of the prediction, but the fact is, even if that is just a little bit higher than what we actually get, that's still a heck of a lot of people. The Tories, from last I checked, were committed to bringing it to the tens of thousands.
Yes, and actually, of course, David Cameron sort of built a rod for everyone's backs by saying that net migration should be lower than 100,000. But I was actually talking to Nick Timothy, Theresa May's advisor, this morning, who reminded me that during the May years, they managed to get it down to 140,000. So the fact that it's nearing 1 million this year really is quite significant. And you ask sort of where those people are coming from. So yes, we've seen this slump in EU nationals coming here to work, but there is an increase in people genuinely fleeing war, students coming to the UK, and the dependence of students. And I've got some figures here which are pretty interesting. So there were 490,000 students who came here on a student visa, plus 136,000 of their dependents who come over here.
I just don't buy this dependence argument at all. I'm sorry, I just don't get it, because when I was at university, there's absolutely no way I could have had anyone depending on me. I didn't have the finances or the resources or the accommodation.
Well, there is a theory among Conservative MPs that some of these people are abusing the system. So you have a tenfold increase over 4 years in the number of student dependents coming over here. And some of these students are coming on sort of 1-year master's degrees, doing what's dubbed as sort of Mickey Mouse degrees, and bringing with them 4 or 5 dependents, which really is massively swelling the numbers. Then, of course, you have the dependents of Ukrainian and Hong Kong genuine refugees. But altogether, these numbers really are ballooning. And Rishi Sunak obviously is focused on the moment on clamping down on illegal immigration, i.e. the small boats. But if at the same time the numbers of legal migrants are swelling to these sort of proportions, then it's unlikely that voters are going to react very well.
No, and it completely undermines, for me, something I'm going to be talking about later on, this idea that it is so hard to get into Britain that you have to take an illegal route to get here. Clearly, it is not that hard to get into Britain if, indeed, we're going to have net migration of around the 1 million mark on top of the 750 that supposedly we're just going to have on top of the 500,000 that we supposedly had the year before. And those, let's be honest, are just the ones we know about. I'm joined now by demographer Dr Paul Morland, who we got a sneaky previous glimpse of there a moment ago. Thank you very much for coming on the show. Now, I am keen to just play the tape forward on this. I think we can forget chat about what happens if we reduce it to the tens of thousands. Let's just assume that's not going to happen. So if we continue at the rate that we're going now, for want of a better phrase, what is Britain going to look like in 20, 30, 40 years' time?
Well, the two places you can look to see what Britain will look like is our big cities today, and particularly the more ethnically diverse parts of those cities, and our primary schools, which will roll forward into the population of the 2030s to 2040s. So it's obviously a Britain in which the element that describes itself in censuses as white British continues to decline, as it has been declining very sharply since the 1990s.
OK, and what kind of rate of decline are we looking at, and what kind of rate of acceleration are we looking at for, well, I suppose, what would you say, people demographically from, where is it? I don't know, Sub-Saharan Africa, the Middle East?
Well, let's take those two questions separately.
Yeah.
So what's the speed of the decline and where are people coming from? In terms of the speed of the decline, there was work done by demographers at Oxford. There's been other work more recently that looks at 2060, where we'll have perhaps 50 to 60% of people defining themselves as white British. But, of course, at that point, if you look at the primary school or the school-age folk or the people in the large cities, it would be a minority and a declining minority.
And that's by what year, we think?
That's by 2050, 2060.
So by 2050 or 2060, a relatively educated guess, or a very educated guess, as to what British primary schools will look like would have white British in the minority?
Yes, I would think so, and the country as a whole, a bare majority. Of course, there is an issue of self-definition in the census, but that's broadly where it will be. Now, in terms of where people are coming from, exactly as you've already said, there has been a shift from EU immigrants to non-EU immigrants, and that's partly because of Brexit, but there's something else going on which I think is being missed, which is that there's declining fertility rates, not only here, which is part of the sucking movement to bring immigrants in, which I'd like to talk about a bit more, but also in places like Poland. So look at the 20-somethings in Poland who would have upsticked in the 90s, 2010s, 2010s. It's falling off a cliff. Poland's had a long period of very low fertility. Their living standards are rising, so their economic motives to come here are narrowing, and there are fewer and fewer of them, and they're more and more needed at home. So even if we wanted more EU immigration, I think we'd find it increasingly difficult to get it.
I think it was a big thing of Brexit. Anyone who thought that voting for Brexit would mean that there would be fewer foreign people / people of a different skin tone to Western Europeans was fundamentally misguided. But I do also think that most people thought we would have greater control of our borders, and therefore we possibly wouldn't be in a situation like the one we're talking about now, which is that we could have a net migration of a million figure, which I think by anyone's stretch of the imagination is absolutely bonkers, really. So you would expect our major cities to be, what, predominantly, would you say, identifying as, what, Muslim, maybe?
Well, there'll be a very lot. I mean, each city will be different. There is a growing element which is Muslim, but the Muslims themselves come from very varied backgrounds. I think there are a number of things going on here, and people get a bit confused. There is the fact that the master's student and the general student industry has grown enormously means we have a very, very large number of people coming in. Many leave, not all of them. And you've talked about their dependence. But I think more important is the fact that there is this huge demand for labour. Our economy is barely growing, and yet we have this huge demand for labour. Sector after sector is crying out to the government to let in workers in their sector. And the reason for that is that for 50 years, we haven't had enough children to replace ourselves. And that problem will only that sucking noise from industry after industry will only really change when our own fertility rate goes back above.
Now, this is something that I'm very interested in, because I think that traditionally in this country there was a very regimented way of doing things, the proper, quote-unquote, proper way of doing things, which was to find someone, get married, property ownership, breed, OK? And clearly now I think the housing market is having a massive, massive block on people wanting to start families and feeling as though they're able to afford that. But the fertility rate is different, I believe, in different demographies, isn't it? Demographics. Why is that? What is that?
Well, I think you have to be very careful before blaming the cost of housing or the cost of childcare. There's no doubt that if it were easier to start a family, to buy a house and to find some means of childcare in a world where we expect both members of a couple to work, the fertility rate would go up. But if you actually look at the parts of the country where housing is quite cheap, or the parts of the country where childcare is more accessible. Or if you look at countries like Germany, where childcare is actually very cheap and very subsidised, they all have low fertility rates. So I think it goes well beyond the simple economics, although that's part of the story. I think it goes to a culture of antinatalism, and there is a new generation coming through the ranks in their 20s today who, I wouldn't say they dislike children or they're positively antenatal, but starting a family is not a priority for them.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Again, though, is that the same in every single culture? Because if British culture, quote unquote, British culture is changing with the influx of people from all over the world and as the things that we've just spoken about there, realistically, are British people, white British I'm talking about now, going to be massively outbred?
I don't think it's a question of outbreeding. I think this is a great misunderstanding. When people come to this country, as when they come to America, they often come from countries with higher fertility rates, and their fertility converges. So if you look at Hindus and Sikhs in Britain today, for example, the best data we have suggests that their fertility rate is no higher than the rest of us. People from Muslim countries are generally coming from countries with a higher fertility rate, so it's higher in Pakistan, for example, than in India. But their fertility rates have fallen enormously. So the ethnic change which is happening, although it's partly driven by the fact they're younger populations, is not really going to be driven by their higher fertility rate. It's really going to be driven by this ongoing immigration, and the ongoing immigration is driven by the fact that all of us, pretty much the whole country, regardless of region, regardless of ethnicity, and almost regardless of religion, is having a fertility rate which is significantly below replacement.
Now, for some people out there who really do care about the demographics of their country and feel as though that there is something that's worth preserving about traditional British culture, there may well also be a concern that a tipping point has already been reached. Has it?
I don't believe in tipping points. I think there are a number of things. First of all, you have the fact that people integrate. People become British. I mean, I cite myself with two immigrant parents feeling 100% British, and there are an awful lot of us out there. So that process goes on. I don't think there's a magic point where a tipping point occurs. But I think if we don't turn around the fertility issue now, in 20 years' time, we're still going to be having this great suck of requirement for immigration, the sucking noise from industries short of people. Because when I started in the workplace back in the 80s, a lot more people in their 20s were coming into the workforce than were leaving it. And now people of my age, I was born in '64, that was the peak of the baby boom. A lot of people of my age are beginning to leave the workforce. More and more of them will leave it in the next 5 or 6 years, 10 years. And we had this drop-off in fertility in the 70s. And until we get a pick-up in the fertility rate, this requirement for immigration, whatever you do with a small boat, however important that is, whatever you do with family reunions, however you choose to count students in and students out, the fundamental issue, the biggest issue by far, is the need for labour, even in our sluggishly growing economy, and the lack of fertility 20 years ago, and the shortage of young people entering the workforce.
Look, thank you very much. As I'm sure you can tell, I could talk to you all day about this, but I'm being shouted at now, so thank you. That is demographer Dr. Paul Morland. Fascinating stuff there. We will be returning to this issue throughout the course of the show, because as far as I can tell, this is absolutely massive, and for me anyway, certainly one of the biggest issues facing our country, because it really does shape our country, doesn't it? But moving on, Philip Schofield is reported to have fallen out with Holly Willoughby. Very much a shift in tone here, ladies and gents. So, is Schofield now about to lose his job as one of daytime TV's most famous presenters? And why? I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion. People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching. Britain's watching. Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel. Britain's news channel.
So Jubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate. Both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Welcome back. Now, is Philip Schofield about to lose his job as the presenter of one of daytime TV's most successful shows? Just a quick warning that there are some flashing images coming up. We wouldn't want to shock you now. So Schofield and Holly Willoughby are said to have fallen out, though he claims his fellow presenter is his rock. Phil only returned to the show recently. He had time off air after his younger brother Timothy was convicted of 11 sexual offences involving a child. Holly and Phil, of course, have also had their own fair share of controversies over the years. I am joined now by Fleet Street showbiz legend Nigel Pawley. Nigel, thank you very, very much. Do you think this is game up now for Philip Schofield? Is Holly Willoughby going to cut him loose?
Things aren't looking very good, Patrick. Funnily enough, on television, what you see isn't always what the reality is. You know, we have scripted reality. And I would say that the Holly and Phil love story for the last 14 years has been a scripted reality show, in that you don't have to get on with the people you work with. I'm sure you get on with everyone at your television station, but that's not always the case. However, they are protected by the management and PR agents. Once that protection has gone, which it appears to have happened with Philip now, it's a downward slope. I can only say that I was the reporter who wrote a story where it was briefed against Anthea Turner, that she was known as Princess Tippy Toes. Very quickly ended after that. We had Fern Britton, we had Richard and Judy. All of them have been in daytime television. All of them have been very popular. And suddenly, once that popularity has gone within the building, and it seems very much that ITV are weighing up now that Holly, Alison Hammond could be a better partnership.
No, indeed. And Holly, I think, has had to put up with a heck of a lot from Philip over the years. And certainly one thing that we definitely can talk about is his big coming out elements of it. She was put in a rather awkward situation there, I think. And I just wonder whether or not she realises that she might be better on her own. Is he worth all this drama? And that's before we get on to, you know, Q-gate for the Queen's funeral.
Yeah, look, I mean, if you recall, when Ant was otherwise engaged for I'm a Celebrity a couple of years ago, she stepped in, and that was the first thing she'd really done on her own. She'd always been in Phil's shadow. But the thing is, this was a carefully crafted partnership. Both had the same agents, both had the same PRs, and they were put together as like the royal couple of daytime television. But Holly left, it was then called James Grant Management about three years ago, set up on her own. And ever since then, there's been friction, because that's the reality. The reality is not all you see on television is truth and is fact. And what's happened over the years, they crafted how close these people were. Whether they spoke when they left the television cameras, who knows? It's for them to say. But they have faced problems. Philip has been groomed for stardom. I use that phrase carefully, since he was very young and a children's presenter at the BBC. He's been carefully guided. Everything has been protected about him. Bad stories were put away. I mean, in my young days as a Fleet Street journalist, our reporter spent weeks and weeks outside his house in Chiswick when he was getting married, because there was some incredulity that he was getting married back in those days. Since then, he has gone through many difficulties, but they've been put over. But the key thing in the stories coming out is that Martin Frizzell, who is the editor of the programme, the big chief, he seems to have suddenly lost faith or lost, that protection, that protective thing, and is looking elsewhere. That is quite significant, because Martin has always been the man who believed in this partnership. And, Philip's not any younger. Females, unfortunately, pass their sell-by date in television terms much younger than men. But Phil's been at the top for a long, long time. And just occasionally your star wanes. He's had more than 15 minutes. He's had, 35 years or whatever.
Nigel, is there any truth to the rumours that the person that we see on television with Philip Schofield might be very, very different to the person that we see off screen, i.e. that supposedly he's not always the nicest chap?
I think you have to put in the fact that there are pressures. I mean, I've been backstage on many television programmes, and I can assure you most of the hosts I've seen are nothing like the smiley, cuddly figures that they are on television. You're accepted. You're the same off screen as on screen. But you are in a minority. And I would doubt very much whether it's Phil or indeed Holly or indeed Ant or indeed Dec is always the smiley figure you see in front of the cameras. It just isn't the case. Philip is a complicated character. He lived a sort of sad life for many years. As you say, he came out a couple of years ago. That must have been a big pressure for him. At the time, being gay was not good in television. Let's give him credit for how difficult that must have been. But he did come out. He's overcome many difficulties. The family issue he had, if you were close to your colleague, I mean, this is what is meant to have caused this row. If you were that close to your colleague and you were going off for a while and your brother was going to be, fairly prominent court case, I think you might just mention it to them if you had any respect for them.
Yeah.
Or whether you were that close. You wouldn't just disappear and then let them read it on Twitter or in the newspapers.
No.
That's
exactly.
why I'm saying that relationship appears to us on camera as being very close. I would suggest behind the cameras and behind the scenes, that's never really been the case.
All right, Nigel, look, thank you very, very much. Great to have you on the show, as always. That's Nigel Pawley there, Fleet Street showbiz legend. Loads more still to come between now and 4 o'clock. I will tell you about the ridiculous new guidelines that say prison officers can't call inmates convicts. Seriously. And speaking of criminals, well, OK, not quite. Find out why the Archbishop of Canterbury isn't quite as innocent as you might think he is. But right now, it's your headlines with Tatiana.
Patrick, thank you very much and good afternoon. This is the latest from the GB Newsroom. Passengers are facing widespread disruption today due to the latest round of train strikes. Members of the ASLEF union are walking out at more than a dozen train operators in a long-running dispute over pay. Tomorrow, RMT members go on strike, disrupting travel to the final of the Eurovision Song Contest in Liverpool. Meanwhile, Rishi Sunak says he's disappointed with the decision to block Ukrainian President Zelensky from addressing the Eurovision Song Contest. Boris Johnson's also expressed his disappointment, tweeting there's only one reason the contest isn't in Ukraine, and that's because of Putin's illegal war. The block is due to concerns from organisers that an address could politicise the event. The European Broadcasting Union says it's against the rules. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer has insisted his party takes allegations of sexual harassment extremely seriously. It follows reports an internal investigation into one case of groping claims took 3 years to complete. In a separate case, a Labour MP has reported one of her party colleagues to the police for alleged sexual assault. Sir Keir Starmer is urging anyone within the party with concerns to come forward.
Well, look, I think all of these allegations have to be taken extremely seriously, and they are taken seriously by me and by the party. I do understand from my experience as Chief Prosecutor how difficult it is for people to come forward. That's among the reasons that we made our process completely independent, so it's not a political process anymore. But what I would say is that I encourage anybody to come forward and to feel that they're supported through that independent process.
The UK economy grew slightly in the first 3 months of the year, but contracted in March, according to official figures. Growth of 0.1% was recorded by the Office for National Statistics in the first quarter. But in March, the economy shrank by 0.3%, mostly driven by a fall in retail and car sales, as well as ongoing strike action. TV, online, DAB+ radio and on TuneIn. This is GB News.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
And here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2507 and 1.1486 euros. The price of gold is £1,614 and 17 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100 is at 7,765 points.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Clearly, the predicted net migration figure of 1 million people a year has absolutely touched a nerve with all of you who are watching and listening, and so many of you are getting in touch. gbviews@gbnews.uk. If you are just joining us, this is that shocking figure that is set to be hitting Britain. 1 million people, a net migration figure of 1 million people. Do you remember the tens of thousands? Yeah, that, ladies and gents, is a distant memory. 1 million people set for the year ahead. That's on top of potentially around 700,000 in the year before that, 500,000 the year before that. And those are, let's be honest now, just the people that we know about. And I can't help but wonder, OK, who are all of these people? Where are they coming from? What jobs have they got? And where are they going to live? And crucially as well, what do you think this is going to do for the demographics of Britain going forward? And if you do care about that, tell me why you care about that, because a lot of snarling individuals will say you shouldn't care about whether or not your area remains, let's say, majority white British. You shouldn't really care about that. And if you do care about that, that makes you a racist. But is there not something about British culture that's worth preserving? Is there not something maybe about the community that you knew and loved and grew up in that is worth preserving? Maybe you just genuinely don't care. If not, let me know why. gbviews@gbnews.uk. But there has to be a link between the amount of younger people who are struggling to get on the housing ladder, the amount of people who are struggling to rent, and the amount that it is costing our NHS, the waiting times for our NHS, some of the issues going on in certain overcrowding of schools and childcare, etc. There has to be a link between that and the amount of people who are coming every single year. And it's the best that we can do to try to boost our economic growth to allow 1 million people in every single year. That's net. And again, I am deeply sceptical of some of the reasons behind this. People go, well, look, it's just students, isn't it? Well, it's not just students. Even if we have about 500,000 students every single year, we are seeing now a lot of them bringing not just one, not just two, but sometimes 3 or 4, quotes unquote, dependents with them. That is an absolute nonsense. How on earth can you be responsible for anybody else, really, the vast majority of the time, when you're at university. And can I also just say, when we have people on this show, a lot of the time, who say these poor people coming over the channel, it's the only way that they can get to Britain because there are no safe and legal routes to this country and they have such a hard time getting a visa. Clearly, it is not hard to get a visa to come and live in Britain. And when they're talking about we need these people to fill the labour shortages and we need them to fill the labour gaps, what labour gaps and labour shortages are we really talking about here? Because we keep hearing, don't we, about our NHS being understaffed. Well, if we were having that migration of 1 million people, I personally would expect to breathe a massive sigh of relief. We shouldn't be short of doctors, we shouldn't be short of nurses, we shouldn't be short of anyone to fill our vital public sector situations. But what's going to happen? This time next year or this time the year after, we will still be having a conversation about how many million people we need to bring into our country every single year to fill these labour shortages. So where are they working? And where are they all living? I've got a load of emails in on this. gbviews@gbnews.uk. If net migration hits 1 million, that is totally irresponsible and dangerous, says Mick. Patrick, you rightly raise concerns about our culture and our cultural traditions. Culturally, I feel increasingly alienated, exacerbated by arrogant woke elites who seem to feel that they have free licence to denigrate white British people and British culture. And this is part of it. I can't help but wonder whether or not you feel a little bit secretive about the changes that you see going on around you, and you don't really want to raise it because a lot of people would immediately hit back one thing and go, why do you care about the fact that your area is now 50% less white? And it's a difficult question to answer, isn't it? Because you feel as though you shouldn't really care about people's skin colour, and of course you shouldn't. But is there not something deep-seated and cultural going on? And there is just a natural, maybe a natural fear of rapid change without us being able to completely account for all of that. And I did have someone on who is a demographer earlier on, and he was saying that, get a load of this, right? By 2050, the majority of primary schools in Britain will be minority white. And this will mean, of course, that Britain will have a very, very, very different society, different culture, and potentially as well different norms, shall we say, and values than it does have right now. And do you not have a right to be concerned about all of that? You can see the email address there. I'm going to be returning to this throughout the course of the show. Britain is broken. Facts. There's no name on this one. Our infrastructure is unable to cope with the numbers that we have now. We cannot build enough homes to cater for the people coming here. Our hospitals and schools and doctors can't cope. Our welfare bill is growing at an astronomical rate every single year. There's no name on that one, but there you go. This ties into it all, doesn't it? And I just don't buy the excuses for these numbers about, oh, it's all students, or it's Ukrainian refugees, or it's refugees from Afghanistan. I'm sorry, but it can't be, can it? And therefore, it cannot be that difficult to get a visa to this country, and therefore, you cannot singularly need to get on a dinghy and come over the channel in order to get here, especially when you look at increased rates of people arriving from places like India. And then you also see as well that the second highest proportion of people coming over the channel, the last time I checked, are indeed from India. So again, there is not the need, is there, to make an illegal journey. How do you feel about all of this going forward, though? Because those figures were supposed to be down in the tens of thousands, and clearly now they are not. Look, there's loads more coming your way here, absolutely loads, and I'm going to be giving you more on all of this very, very shortly. But I want your views as well. gbviews@gbnews.uk. And, yeah, a load of people here now saying that around 75% of school children in their particular area are non-white. Again, why does that particularly bother you, I suppose? But how's this for an example of the woke world that we live in these days? I'm shifting topics now, that's right. So prison officers have been ordered to stop using the word convicts when referring to criminals. Civil servants working from the prison service have told staff that they should use terms such as persons with lived experience, OK, or prison leavers for ex-convicts. What on earth is the world coming to? It also comes on the same day that we find out that the Viper Squad, which is the name given to the police force that is dealing with organised gun crime, is going to change their name to soften it a little bit, because it just seems like it might be a little bit mean. I'm joined now by Conservative MP Craig McKinley. Craig, thank you very much. Great to have you on the show. So why can't we call cons cons?
Well, I would, and I probably do. It's another day where we sort of shake our head and think, well, what on earth are these mandarins in Whitehall thinking of? I can't even imagine what it's like at the coalface, those working in our prisons. They must similarly think, well, this is normal parlance. The convicts, the prisoners, the offenders, they know what the words are. It's been used for generations. I can't see it causes offence. And I don't think for one moment, Patrick, that the people who are in prison, the men and women who have found themselves in prison, not an easy thing to cross to get into a custodial sentence these days, as we know. I don't think they're snowflakes. I don't think they're going to collapse and say how beastly it all is. I mean, I can't believe that you've got Whitehall managers, as I say, coming up with this sort of nonsense. I have visited prisons. I visited one just recently, His Majesty's Prison, Swaleside in Sheppey. That's a sort of A- B+. And there was mutual respect between the prisoners and the officers. Everybody knew their place. There was, obviously it's a tough environment, and I saw mutual respect going on. The situation is right, and I don't think just playing around with words, going down the woke rabbit hole that we're seeing.
But what kind of idiot comes up with this, Craig? What kind of idiot, right, looks at our prison system at the moment, which is a breeding ground to produce... It's like a finishing school for convicts, OK? If you go in there having dealt a little bit of cannabis, you'll come out of it knowing how to deal with Class A stuff. If you come in there going in for some kind of knife crime, you'll come out of it quite possibly having been radicalised by some, Islamist cult that's in there and then ready to go on and commit an even more heinous crime. Why on earth is anyone looking at our prison system now and going, the right thing to do is to make sure that we don't stigmatise convicts. Instead, we call them prison leavers.
Well, absolutely. It makes you wonder, as you say, there's lots going wrong in our prison system. I think it's in a better place than it was. What I saw, I mean, I can only go on what I see when I visited Swaleside, particularly a tough prison, and everything was running as you'd expect it to do. I didn't see any of that sort of outrageous things going on that you might describe in terms of making people worse. I saw a very, very sensible prison environment. Sir Robert Buckland, when he was the Justice Secretary last year, he did put out an edict that these people were not to be called residents or service users. I mean, these are people who are paying their debt to society, paying their debt to victims. I'm afraid they have lost the variety of their rights, as it were, because of the offences that they have committed. And as I say, I don't think they're snowflakes. I don't think we're going to see a sudden improvement in behaviour because they're called, residents or service users. But to describe people who have left prison, one of the words thou shalt not use is ex-con. They are to be called persons with lived experiences. Well, that's you and I, Patrick. Yeah. We've probably got those in spades, I would have thought.
Yeah, 100%. Look, Craig, I hope you don't mind this. I just do want to ask you a little bit about this absolutely damning predicted figure of about 1 million people net going to arrive in the UK over the course of the next year. And, I mean, enough is enough, surely. What on earth is going on? And just before we get cracking on this, I do not buy this line that it's all Ukrainian refugees, Afghan refugees and students. Craig, who are these people? Where are they going to live? What jobs are they going to do? What's going on?
Well, I'm awaiting the figures, Patrick, and they're going to be, I don't think they're going to be released for a few weeks, and it could be up to the 650, 700, 750,000 for 2022. We do need to strip out the Ukrainian issue. That's hopefully a one-off, certainly hope so for world peace and security. We have got the British passport holders overseas, the Hong Kongers, and some others that have come through legal routes. But the student one is always odd. I've always been fairly relaxed about students because they are a British export. They're bringing money to the country. But when you hear that those on a master's degree are allowed to bring the entirety of their families with them, it seems to me that the student route is being used as a backdoor route. With a 2-year visa after you've qualified, as a means, if you've got money in your pocket, of getting a permanent residency in the UK. But you're quite right. My email inbox as an MP is full of people trying to find accommodation, expensive rents, and all of the rest of it. Just, not enough houses to go round. How on earth we can cope with another...
We're being gaslit, Craig. I'm sorry, but we're being absolutely gaslit. And we are, and I get this isn't your fault directly, but we're being gaslit by a government who keeps at least telling us that we're desperately trying to do something about immigration. I'm sorry, but we're not. As far as I can tell, you can just walk into Britain now. It looks that way anyway, or sail in, and you can probably stay here. Craig, look, thank you very much. Craig McKinley there, Conservative MP. Right, we're a little bit pressed for time because we've had a lot to fit in, but I'm going to get my kit off with a group of male strippers next month. Yeah, that's right, a shift in turn, ladies and gentlemen. But Nigel Farage is trying to steal my thunder. I can't believe this. I'm going to be having a bit of a set to with Nigel very shortly. I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, there we go. So, how about this for a story, hey? It turns out that the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, isn't as innocent as you might think. So on the same day that he criticised the government's migration policy in the House of Lords, Welby was fined £510 for, and by the way, prepare for the crime of the century here, ladies and gentlemen, driving at 25 miles an hour in a 20-mile-an-hour zone. I mean, this is the classic Archbishop way to get yourself done, isn't it? But there we go. It seems the Archbishop has a little bit of a need for speed, OK? And who'd have thought, though, who'd have thought that Justin Welby was indeed a boy racer? And this guy is a complete... You know, he tries to lecture us all, doesn't he? Lecture us all about morality in this world and how we all need to be doing the right thing. And meanwhile, he's around there razzing it in his Bishopmobile, the dizzying heights of 25 miles an hour in a 20 zone, having to pay fines for it all. I mean, it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. But it did, of course, get me thinking of a possible few different careers for him, right? So here he is on the Formula One track. There he is, as Sterling Moss. And I think we can just see him there, can't we? Yes, fantastic. Razzing it round the corners. And as well, who else have we got here? Oh, there we go. That's him there, feeling the need for speed. Welby will be appearing in the new Top Gun film. So there we are. And I believe we've got one more there. Yeah, that's right. That's right. So what's actually happening is that in a bizarre move, Justin Welby is going to be in the next Speed film as Keanu Reeves, and Keanu Reeves is now our Archbishop, believe it or not. So apparently, yeah, there was a little bit of a turnaround there. But there you go. So I just thought I'd bring you that story. You know, the next time he takes to his feet in the Lords and lectures us all on morality and virtue signaling, etc., just remember that that guy is not afraid to do 25 miles an hour in a 20 zone. Anyway, love it or hate it, you can't escape Eurovision, even on GB News. And there's just a day to go until the big event takes place in Liverpool. The UK is, of course, hosting Eurovision because last year's winners, Ukraine, can't stage it. There we go. Tickets for tomorrow night sold out in just 36 minutes. Let's go now to our Northwest reporter and unofficial Eurovision correspondent. It's Sophie Reaper. Sophie, are you getting in the Eurovision spirit?
I absolutely am, Patrick, and I must say I quite like that title of unofficial Eurovision correspondent. That's going straight on my CV. It's absolutely electric here in Liverpool. The dress rehearsal for the big final tomorrow night has just finished. We've seen each of the 26 countries take to the stage one by one in order to practice for tomorrow night's big show. We've seen some incredible performances, some incredible costumes, props, everything any Eurovision superfan would be expecting to see. Now, I don't want to spoil anything for anyone, but there is a 20-foot tall, sparkly black dress that comes along with the French performance, and also a great big white shell that one of the performers starts his in. So that's one to look out for. You know, the acts are as amazing as ever. Our British act, Mae Muller, is last up on the roster. I think that might be a little bit tactical from the UK, putting her last so she's fresh in voters' memories. But I will say this, Patrick, Liverpool is absolutely alight. There may be political controversies around Eurovision, but here in Liverpool, no one cares about that. Everyone is just soaking up the atmosphere and enjoying everything that a wacky old Eurovision has to offer.
Very much. Our unofficial Eurovision correspondent there. Fantastic. Can I just, don't want to, you know, downplay anything here at all. Thank you very much, Sophie, by the way. It's just some polling that was done, because I am strongly of the view that no one really cares about Eurovision, OK? I don't think anyone really cares about it. I think people pretend to care about it. It's just an excuse to get absolutely lit up on a Saturday night. YouGov did a poll. Do you care about Eurovision, if at all? Not at all, 45%, and not very much, 32%. A fair amount, 13%, and a great deal, 6%. So there we go. Clearly not many people do care about Eurovision. Now, as many of you know, I am getting ready to appear on stage with the Dream Boys, a performance that no doubt many more of you do care about, who call themselves the UK's most famous strippers. But it might be too late, because Nigel Farage is trying to steal my limelight. If you haven't seen what he did last night, you're missing out. And if you're listening on radio, count yourself lucky. Quick clip of Nigel.
You know what I mean, and he does his little turn on the catwalk. Now on the catwalk, yeah, he does his little turn on the catwalk. Get him off, Nigel. I'm too sexy for my cat, too sexy for my cat. Poor pussy cat. I'm too sexy for my love, too sexy for my love. Love's going to leave me.
OK. You can donate to my Just Giving page, which is justgiving.com/fundraising/challenge Christys. And I promise you I will actually be getting my kit off, which may be horrific for you, but it is happening for charity on the 28th of June in Bromley. Right, loads more still to come. Net migration in the UK this year could be 1 million. That is pretty much double last year's figure. Who are these people? Where are they coming from? What are they doing when they get here? And where are they living? All of that coming your way very, very shortly.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive, because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's just gone 4 p.m. You're with me, Patrick Christys, right here on GB News, and here's what I've got coming your way this busy hour. Is Britain full? These predicted net migration figures of 1 million is an absolute joke. Who are all of these people? Where are they all coming from? Where are they going to live? We're told that they're filling labour shortages. What labour shortages are they? And actually, is enough now? Are the British public being taken for a ride? Because let's be honest, they're the people that we know about, aren't they? Moving on, we're also going to be talking about this. Yes, very serious story, this. OK, so a member of the Labour Party been accused of a sexual assault. We'll be going to our political correspondent for all the very latest on that and what Sir Keir Starmer's reaction to it all is as well. And, yes, we're going to be talking about this. PCs to PC. Well, it turns out they are. So the Viper Squad, which is the group of people that we tasked to go around and essentially shoot really bad gun-toting people in this country, OK? Well, apparently they're going to change the name from the Viper Squad because it's a little bit too off-putting and mean. For who? The people walking around our streets with AK-47s, taking pot shots out of other drug dealers? No, absolutely bonkers. I've got all this coming your way and loads more as well, yes, as another cheeky little peek at Nigel Farage's bare chest. And if that doesn't keep you watching, ladies and gents, nothing will. Patrick Christys on GB News. So far, this is the most emailed into show that I have ever done, so keep them coming. gbviews@gbnews.uk, and it is largely centred around that issue. Net migration of 1 million. And what will this mean for the demographics of Britain going forward? And why do you care about that? How would you respond if I said to you right now that the only reason that you really care about the demographics of Britain changing is presumably because you don't like foreign people or you're a racist? What would your response to that be? Tell me. gbviews@gbnews.uk. I look forward to hearing from you. Now, though, it's the headlines with Tatiana.
Patrick, thank you very much. It's 2 minutes past 4. This is the latest from the GB Newsroom. Passengers are facing widespread disruption today due to the latest round of train strikes. Members of the ASLEF union are walking out at more than a dozen train operators in a long-running dispute over pay. Tomorrow, RMT members go on strike on the day of the Eurovision Song Contest final in Liverpool. Further strikes by the union will be held on May the 31st and June 3rd. That's the day of the FA Cup final at Wembley. Rail Minister Hugh Merriman told GB News the strikes are disappointing.
We have been able to facilitate an offer which has been put to the union leaders. The problem we've got is that they won't put it forward to their members. Similar offers have been put forward to other members of unions and they've accepted them. So logic would dictate if the union leaders did the same, we could see an end to this action. And I'm really sorry for all passengers who have been disrupted today.
Meanwhile, Rishi Sunak says he's disappointed with the decision to block Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky from addressing the Eurovision Song Contest. The block is due to concerns from organisers that an address could politicise the event. The Ukrainian president wanted to urge the global audience to continue supporting his country against Russia's invasion. The European Broadcasting Union says it's against the rules. The UK economy grew slightly in the first 3 months of the year, but contracted in March, according to official figures. Growth of 0.1% was recorded by the Office for National Statistics in the first quarter. But in March, the economy shrank by 0.3%, mostly driven by a fall in retail and car sales, as well as ongoing strike action. Chancellor Jeremy Hunt says although the slight growth is a positive step, there's more work that needs to be done.
Well, these are much better figures than anyone would possibly have predicted, even 3 months ago. And that's partly because of what the Governor of the Bank of England said yesterday, measures in the budget that are helping to help companies to recruit, tackle some of the underlying problems in the economy. But there is still much work to do. We still have inflation that is much too high. That's causing a lot of pressure for families up and down the country. That's why we've got to stick to our plan to get inflation down, to get growth up, and to get the economy motoring in the way that we all want.
The Archbishop of Canterbury has been convicted of speeding. In London, Justin Welby was ordered to pay £510 and given 3 points on his licence for exceeding a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit last October. The hearing was held on the same day he made a rare intervention in the House of Lords, condemning the government's plans to tackle the small boats crisis as morally unacceptable. A Lambeth Palace spokesperson says the Archbishop was aware of the speeding offence but hadn't been notified it had gone to court. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer has insisted his party takes allegations of sexual harassment extremely seriously. It follows reports an internal investigation into one case of groping claims took 3 years to complete. In a separate case, a Labour MP has reported one of her party colleagues to the police for alleged sexual assault. Sir Keir Starmer is urging anyone within the party with concerns to come forward.
Well, look, I think all of these allegations have to be taken extremely seriously, and they are taken seriously by me and by the party. I do understand from my experience as Chief Prosecutor how difficult it is for people to come forward. That's among the reasons that we made our process completely independent, so it's not a political process anymore. But what I would say is that I encourage anybody to come forward and to feel that they're supported through that independent process.
A man has been convicted of the 1992 murder of 7-year-old Nikki Allen in Sunderland. 55-year-old David Boyd was wearing a T-shirt saying, "I am unstoppable," during one of his police interviews. Until now, 30 years on, he'd escaped justice. Northumbria Police first prosecuted the wrong man, who was cleared after a trial in 1993. Royal Mail's chief executive is to step down. Simon Thompson will leave the role in October after 2 years in the job. The announcement comes just weeks after agreeing a deal with the Communication Workers Union, bringing an end to a year of postal strikes. He says it's the right time to hand over to a new CEO. Pakistan's ex-Prime Minister Imran Khan is to be released on bail for 2 weeks. The decision from the High Court in Islamabad comes a day after the Supreme Court ruled his arrest on corruption charges was illegal. The events earlier this week have sparked unrest in the country, with almost 2,000 people arrested so far. Imran Khan denies any wrongdoing. And finally, astronomers led by the University of Southampton have spotted what they believe to be the largest cosmic explosion ever seen. It's more than 10 times brighter than any other recorded exploding star, known as a supernova. And to date, it's lasted more than 3 years. Most are only visibly bright for a few months. Researchers say these events are very rare and nothing on this scale has ever been witnessed before. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now it's back to Patrick.
Oh, we start with this absolutely shocking story, which is that net migration to the UK this year could be 1 million. That is pretty much double last year's figure, and it makes a total mockery of the claim that leaving the EU would give us back control of our borders. But more than 45,000 migrants arrived on small boats in 2022, and 6,800 have already crossed the Channel this year. So all of the focus is on them, isn't it? All of the focus is on stopping the illegal Channel crossings, which, FYI, we're not doing. But that is a tiny fraction of the total number of people who are settling in the UK every single year. And this poses some very, very concerning issues, because this latest figure is on top of around 700,000 that we've had within the last year, around 500,000 the year before, around 300,000 the year before that. Let's be honest, these are just the people as well that we happen to know about. And I would have thought by now that if we were seriously having a visa scheme that worked, we would be attracting a lot of very highly skilled people. This is what we hear, isn't it, all the time, that the people that we're attracting here come and work and do very, very good jobs for the sake of our economy. Well, why have we still got a recruitment crisis in the NHS? Are there enough doctors and GPs? Are there enough nurses? Are there enough people working in the public sector? Because every single day I sit here and say, well, no, there aren't. And so where are all these people going? Where are they working? And where are they living, crucially? We have a housing crisis in this country. But there is also, I would argue, maybe a more pressing issue here, which is if we now look at the certain countries that some of these people are coming from and where they are located geographically around the world and the cultures that are there, is it just a done deal that we will be completely losing any sense of British culture? And what will the demographics of Britain look like in the years to come? I had someone on before who's an expert in demographics who said to me that by the year 2050, white people in Britain will be either half of the population or, when you look at the primary schools, a really tiny minority. Is this something that you care about or not? Because the obvious counter to that is, well, why would you care if the white population is decreasing? Are you a racist? Are you, in some way xenophobic? So if you do care about that, why do you? I want to hear from you, and loads of people have. I'm going to go to my guests, and I'm going to go into the inbox because the emails are just absolutely flooding in at the moment. I'm joined now by Conservative peer and former Culture Minister. It's Ed Vaizey. Ed, look, thank you very, very much. I've identified some pretty key issues there that I think a lot of the members of the public will be very, very concerned about on this. What is going on? Where are all these people going to live? And what kind of jobs are they doing? Because I do not buy the idea that we are now taking the world's best people.
Well, the statistics are pretty astonishing when you consider that 10 years ago, David Cameron, when he was Prime Minister, promised to get immigration below 100,000, and now we've reached 1 million people, which is 10 times David Cameron's target. Now, I'm a Remainer, so there's part of me that has a wry smile on my face about the arguments that were put during the Brexit campaign that we would control our borders and therefore reduce immigration. It hasn't been reduced. There are a couple of points that are in favour of immigration. The first is that these figures don't take out the students who come here. And a lot of, we have some of the best universities in the world, and actually we charge foreign students an arm and a leg when they come and study here. So if they come and study
Ed,
here,
can I just hit back on that quickly? Just quickly, because we do have some of the best universities in the world, Ed, but we also have a lot of absolutely rubbish universities offering nothing more than a boatload of student debt for people to cling on to for the rest of their lives, having studied a Mickey Mouse degree. And what I suspect is happening, and anyone with eyes and ears will as well, is that a load of people from different countries are coming here and saying, I'll do a master's at Tim Pot University just down the road from Idiotsville, and I'll bring all my relatives with me as well. And it's just you're paying some kind of student fee in order to just move to Britain.
Well, that may be the case, but if they're going to Timbot University in Idiotsville, they are at least paying student fees, which is earning someone in the UK an income. But I would hesitate to say that every university that every foreign student is going to is full of Mickey Mouse degrees. I mean, I think that there are some good things about the fact that effectively, when you import students to study at universities, you're actually helping your exports. It sounds counterintuitive. So you're making money from foreign purchasers of our services. So that's a good thing, I think, potentially. And also it's good for our soft power because hopefully quite a few of those people will go back to their home countries, have successful careers and have a huge affection for the UK as they climb up the ladder and even become the leaders of their countries. And, it's a very competitive marketplace. There's Australia, America, Canada, they all want these foreign students. The second point, which again is, you can take different views on this. If you look at what is happening with Western populations in particular, but actually a lot of populations all around the world, they are aging rapidly. And you made the point about whether or not white people would be a minority in the country in 2050. I don't know the answer to that, but what I do know is that the majority of the population will probably be over 65, and many of them will be infirm. So there is an argument that says immigration is helpful to our economy because it tends to be young people coming to the country who are going to do the jobs, pay the taxes that we need for this country. But having said that, I have no problem with debating the cultural impact of large-scale immigration on a country.
This is the thing, isn't it? And for the sake of Britain looking better on a spreadsheet, which, to be honest with you, given yesterday's economic figures, I would massively dispute that our current policy when it comes to mass migration on a scale never before seen in this country, in order to try to help our economy, I would dispute the fact that that's working. Because I look around, I don't care what anyone from the Bank of England says or anything like that, anybody can go outside their front door now and look around and see that it is not working. And I have got to ask you, why does the Conservative Party not care about preserving British culture?
Well, I think, again, there are different ways of answering that question. Firstly, as a Remainer, I would ask the Brexit cabinet that promised to control our borders what they think they're doing when they promised that they would reduce immigration if we all voted for Brexit, because they've broken that promise. And that's a question for them to answer. But I think it is important to debate what it means to be British. We have a Prime Minister of Indian heritage who's a Hindu. We have a Home Secretary who's a person of colour. We have a Foreign Secretary. I regard all of them as British and deeply patriotic and deeply steeped in our values. They care passionately about our country. They were born here. Kemi Badenoch, the Trade Secretary, was born here but grew up in Nigeria. But again, I regard her as passionately patriotic. And we are living in a multicultural society. There are plenty of towns and cities in this country with very large second or third generation immigrant populations, all of whom I regard
do
as
you
people
think,
who are passionately British.
Do you think that people have a right to look at the demographics around where they live and where that currently would be a majority white British demographic? Do you think that there's ever a case for anyone legitimately saying, I genuinely hope it stays that way and I'm very concerned that it's not?
I do understand why people can think about that. Nobody wants to grow up in a country where the makeup of their local neighbourhood changes rapidly and where they might feel alienated from a culture that they, or a neighbourhood they grew up in, because the culture has changed dramatically. It does tend to be the case, though, that it's areas that are overwhelmingly white where the greatest fear or concern about immigration exists, and that may be people don't want to lose what they have. I represented a constituency that was 98% white. There was concern about immigration there, but if you went to an inner London constituency, the concern would be lower, partly because people know
just immigrated very in that
what
hole,
it's like to live in a kind of very mixed community.
OK, all right. Look, and Ed, I've got to be honest with you, I am concerned massively about what this means for people trying to get on the housing ladder. And why am I looking at a situation now and I'm still seeing a recruitment crisis with GPs? When I see this figure, 1 million people, which is a prediction, I think initially, oh, great, brilliant. well, that's surely a load of GPs, a load of highly skilled people, a load of nurses, a load of people that this country needs. But it isn't, is it?
Well, that's a good question. Again, I think you need a government minister to come on and explain, first of all, why immigration is so high. It's an extremely high figure. You remember when Angela Merkel allowed 1 million refugees to settle in Germany? It was highly controversial, and there's no doubt at all that large-scale immigration can cause significant problems. You see it in the Paris suburbs, and you see it in places like Stockholm in Sweden. And the key point is, I think, something that unites people like me who tend to be more liberally minded and people on the centre-right, is that people are justified in saying that immigration should be controlled. And what I find very confusing about these figures is it is actually extremely difficult to come to this country. I mean, I had as an MP, for example. Well, that's the point I'm saying, that technically it's very difficult. As an MP, I would regularly have people saying, we can't get our son or our brother into the country because they have to travel hundreds of miles to a visa centre. They have to pay hundreds, if not thousands of pounds to get their visa. It can take months for them to get it. There are plenty of businesses that say how difficult it is to get the skilled workers they need when they find someone who lives abroad. So I don't understand why this figure is so extraordinarily high. It needs to be broken down. It needs to be analysed, as you say yourself. Not only do I say, first of all, how many of these immigrants are students, in which case I think it's potentially quite a good thing for us, but as you say, how many of these immigrants are highly skilled workers, GPs, business people, teachers, and so on, that we do need for our public services and for our economy. And as you say, one of the concerns about immigration is obviously pressure on public services and housing. The cost of housing still, despite the rise in interest rates, remains extraordinarily high, particularly in the southeast. And young people growing up in London are going to find it extremely hard to leave home and buy a house. So there needs to be an open debate about immigration. I've never been one of these people who thinks that people who question the level of immigration or want to see tighter immigration are somehow racist.
Well,
we all,
the thing is, it's a numbers thing now, Ed, isn't it? It's a numbers thing now, Ed. Yeah. Look, Ed, thank you. And I don't believe I've had you on the show before. I would love to have you on again. I really enjoyed this, and thank you very, very much for coming on and having such a robust discussion. I really appreciate it. It's Ed Vaizey there, who is, of course, the Conservative peer and former culture minister. And I think when you look at numbers like that, how on earth can people say, oh, well, it's just small-minded little Englanders and racists who care about this? 1 million people. Who are they? Where are they coming from? We've got a guy there. We don't know. We don't know. It's supposedly very difficult to get into Britain. It's so difficult that you have to take a small boat across the channel. Well, it can't be, can it? It absolutely can't be. Anyway, what effect will the huge increase in net migration have on British culture? I'm joined now by Aman Magal, who's the founding chairman of Global Britain UK. Aman, thank you very, very much. And I am concerned about the loss, potentially, of British culture with an increase, a rapid increase, a far too rapid increase of people into this country. I'm keen to get your views on it. What are your thoughts?
I mean, look, I think, Patrick, first of all, thanks for having me on the show. For years, the British public has voted repeatedly to cut immigration and control immigration to the tens of thousands. And the reason for that is quite simple. First of all, it's never about race. It's about resources. It's never about the type of people coming in. Now, that can be highly skilled migrants, that can be low-skilled migrants. It's about the cultures that people are coming in from and whether they're compatible with core British values. And there is simply no heuristic, there is no process in the visa issuing system that looks at that. First of all, the visa issuing system that we have for students, for example. Right now, we've had the highest number of student visas issued year on year. Now, I was quite surprised when I was visiting India a few months ago to see a large number of visa consultants that have propped up over the last 10 years. And one thing that was being advertised was students can immigrate to the US and the UK without an IELTS qualification. So you don't have to prove that you have proficiency in the English language to come and study in the UK. At least 20 advertised universities in the UK studying in English. Of course, you'll have to, but you don't have to prove that you have a proficiency in the English language. Now, surely that is a core thing for any immigrant to be coming into England, to the UK, to be able to speak, understand the English language, if you're going to integrate, if you're going to go out in society and add value.
Yeah, 100%. And I'm really, really pleased that you, with your first-hand experience of what you've seen with your own eyes, can come here and tell the nation that, because I'm sick and tired of being lied to, man. And I think the British public are sick and tired of being lied to about all of this. And there appears to be, from what you've said there, absolutely no attempt whatsoever in our current immigration process to even give a second thought to what some people coming over here might... how well they might be able to integrate to this country. Would that be fair?
I think, look, we've heard recently that both the Prime Minister and the Home Secretary are now very keen to stop students from bringing their family members, from their dependents, over to the UK with them. And that's been something that has added to the numbers. So I think last year, if you look at, for example, visas issued to Indians, so around 118,000 visas were issued to highly skilled Indian migrants, and that's fantastic. Doctors, engineers, other professionals. Around 100,000+ visas were also issued to students. Now, what we don't know is how many other visas were issued to dependents, and that is also a key figure that adds to these numbers. I mean, look, I think the Prime Minister and the Home Secretary trying to stop students from bringing their dependents over is a good thing. Again, this is about resources, not race. And above all, I think if any type of net zero we should be having is net zero migration.
Yeah, look, Aman, thank you very, very much. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show, and I hope to talk to you again very soon, my good man. There's Aman Bagal there, who is the founding chairman of Global Britain UK. How fascinating was that now, then, that realistically there appears to be no thought given whatsoever when immigration applications to come to this country are made about whether or not that individual might be able to integrate into British culture. And it's all very well and good using the argument, isn't it, that people come over here to study and that they bring a bit of money to this country, i.e. they pay their university fees. Is that the price we are putting on British culture, is it? If that was put to a vote, which, by the way, it is, every single general election and was during the Brexit referendum, for what price would you be willing to essentially sell Britain down the road? When you open your front door and you maybe don't recognise exactly what you see when you look out that door, well, it's OK, because people are paying a university money to go and study there. Is it? I'm not sure that washes with the British public. GB Views at gbnews.uk. Now, a senior Labour MP has been accused of sexually assaulting one of his female colleagues. I want to know, is Westminster a safe place to work if you're a woman? I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Yeah, welcome back. Now, of course, I started the show with a shocking story about migration figures, but I'm not going to tell you about another absolutely shocking story, actually, but for very, very different reasons. A shadow minister has been reported to the police by a female Labour MP who says that he sexually assaulted her. And it got me thinking about the culture of Westminster, what it's like to work in there as a woman. And joining me is Joanne Nadler, who used to work in Westminster. Look, Joanne, thank you very much. It's great to have you on the show and to talk about situations like this. And it does appear that Westminster, which has 650 MPs, there appears to be quite a startling rate of at least allegations of sexual misconduct. I mean, does this surprise you?
Well, yes and no, Patrick. I mean, I should just say you're quite correct that I used to work in Westminster, although I was never employed in the House of Commons as such. I was a journalist working for the BBC, and I'm still very often in Westminster. And my own experience has been pretty positive on the whole. I mean, there have been a couple of what I would describe as sort of minor incidents, nothing on the sort of scale that we're hearing about in this particular case. And indeed, unfortunately, in a number of different cases and incidents in recent years. And it's not obviously just a problem for the Labour Party. We've seen a Conservative MP in the House of Commons watching pornography actually during a debate, which was, pretty shocking. Well, very shocking, frankly. But to your question about the culture of Westminster, whether it's a safe place for women to work, I mean, as I say, I always found it a safe place. But I do think that there are certain elements of the political life, not least the fact that there are a lot of bars in the House of Commons, which serve alcohol at reduced rates to tired MPs. And that often, I think, is a precursor to events which aren't appropriate. And of course, you have a lot of MPs who divide their time between a home life somewhere else and a life in Westminster. And you have a lot of young people, very sort of cheek by jowl with older people who perhaps have a different kind of approach to how to handle relations between the sexes and aren't as, shall we say, aren't as sensitive to what people rightly expect now.
So do you think that when people call Westminster this, kind of cesspit of sexual harassment and rampant boozing, and they call it Pestminster, don't they? Do you think that's slightly overblown, then?
Well, my suspicion is that it is, but I wouldn't like to speak from the point of view of somebody who's currently working in the House of Commons, because I'm not. And I can see all sorts of circumstances in which situations can arise that are possibly more easily likely within that sort of working environment than they are elsewhere. But I mean, it is not by any stretch of the imagination a problem that's solely in Westminster. And we've seen from the CBI very recently that unfortunately in various institutions and places, there is a bit of a culture of quite frankly, treating women as second-class citizens. But it should also be remembered, it's not just women here that are potentially victims. I spoke to a colleague of mine who works in Westminster today, a young man, and he said that, he's quite often put in compromising positions by other men. So I think, sexual misconduct is not
Okay.
sort of restricted to asexuality or a sex.
No, and I think that's a really, really important point. I'm certainly very glad that you've made it. Joanne, great to have you on the show and all the best. I hope to chat soon. There's Joanne Nadler there, who used to work in Westminster as a reporter, as well as a political commentator and author as well of Too Nice to Be a Tory. But unfortunately, this is far from an isolated case, and that is, of course, the allegation, if you are just joining us, about a prominent Labour MP being investigated allegedly for sexual harassment, etc. But unfortunately, this is far from an isolated case. It was reported in April last year that an incredible 56 MPs were under investigation for sexual harassment, and plenty of the current and former MPs have been proven to have been guilty of inappropriate behaviour or worse. I believe we can have a little look at a few of them. So we've got Imran Ahmed Khan, who was still a Tory MP when he was found guilty last May of sexually assaulting a teenage boy in 2008. He was jailed for 18 months. Former Conservative MP Charlie Elphicke, who was jailed in 2020 for sexually assaulting 2 women. Mike Hill, as well, resigned as a Labour MP in 2021, 4 months before an employment tribunal ruled that he'd repeatedly sexually assaulted and harassed a parliamentary staff member. And as you're acutely aware, that is just a handful of people involved. So given the fact that there are around, 650 MPs, that's clearly quite a high proportion of them who are being investigated or have been investigated for alleged sexual misconduct. But there's loads more still to come between now and 5 p.m. Well, I've got the crazy story about the armed police squad that's had to change its name because it was too aggressive. That's right, armed police, their name being too aggressive. What is the world coming to? And I will ask, just why are Brexiteers treated so badly by the mainstream media? And I will have the one and only Alex Phillips on that, who, as I'm sure you're all aware, was accosted in a tirade by foul Alistair Campbell a little bit earlier on yesterday. But first, here's your latest news with Tatiana Sanchez.
Patrick, thank you very much. This is the latest from the GB newsroom. Passengers are facing widespread disruption today due to the latest round of train strikes. Members of the ASLEF union are walking out at more than a dozen train operators in a long-running dispute over pay. Tomorrow, RMT members go on strike, disrupting travel to the final of the Eurovision Song Contest in Liverpool. Meanwhile, Rishi Sunak says he's disappointed with the decision to block Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky from addressing the Eurovision Song Contest. Boris Johnson's also expressed his disappointment, tweeting there's only one reason the contest isn't in Ukraine, and that's because of Putin's illegal war. The block is due to concerns from organisers an address could politicise the event. The European Broadcasting Union says it's against the rules. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer has insisted his party takes allegations of sexual harassment extremely seriously. It follows reports an internal investigation into one case of groping claims took 3 years to complete. In a separate case, a Labour MP has reported one of her party colleagues to the police for alleged sexual assault. Sir Keir Starmer is urging anyone within the party with concerns to come forward.
Well, look, I think all of these allegations have to be taken extremely seriously, and they are taken seriously by me and by the party. I do understand from my experience as Chief Prosecutor how difficult it is for people to come forward. That's among the reasons that we made our process completely independent, so it's not a political process anymore. But what I would say is that I encourage anybody to come forward and to feel that they're supported through that independent process.
The UK economy grew slightly in the first 3 months of the year, but contracted in March, according to official figures. Growth of 0.1% was recorded by the Office for National Statistics in the first quarter. But in March, the economy shrank by 0.3%, mostly driven by a fall in retail and car sales, as well as ongoing strike action. TV, online, DAB+ radio and on TuneIn. This is GB News. Now it's over to Patrick.
Well, in the last hour, I brought you the absolutely ridiculous story that prison officers have been told to not call criminals convicts. But I've got an equally daft story for you now, because a police unit that tackles violent crime is apparently changing its name because it was too aggressive. The Viper Squad operates in London. Apparently Viper wasn't a nice enough name. No, it's got connotations, so there we go. It's now going to be called the Proactive Armed Team. Good grief. Joining me now is former Scotland Yard detective Peter Blexley. Peter, thank you very much. What on earth is going on?
Well, of course, the Metropolitan Police is, in so many regards, so fluffy in 2023, and this is just another example of it. But, of course, in policing, everything is given an acronym. So the Proactive Armed Team, as it's now going to be known, will be given the acronym PAT.
Oh.
OK? Now, that may be offensive, of course, to people called Patrick or Patricia.
Well, I'm offended.
Should they shoot someone, for example?
Yeah, shot by Pat.
Yeah, and where's it all going to end? You know, I mean, it's opened a can of worms because, of course, the Metropolitan Police have got a special branch. Now, surely that's far too elitist, so they might have to be average branch, mightn't they?
Yeah, bang average branch, yeah.
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 And so it goes on.
I mean, it is just the idea. Who comes up with this stuff? So bear in mind, it's worth just telling people what kind of individual that this Viper unit would be used to dealing with.
Serious armed criminals.
Right.
So isn't Viper a great name for them?
Yeah.
You'd want to be on that team. And when people, colleagues, you know, you meet them, say, you know, what are you doing these days? What team are you on? Where are you working?
Yeah.
I'm on Viper. And everybody knows you're dealing with very serious, bad, armed criminals. But no, I'm on the Proactive Armed Team. Oh, right.
But also as well, I don't know, I mean, psychologically, I get that the idea of the kind of people that they're dealing with are probably not put off by any name. But, you know, if they thought that the Viper Squad were after them, it probably is a little bit more fear-inducing than thinking the Proactive Armed Team is there.
You hit on a very, very good point here, because do you know what? Criminals were fearful of certain police stations, OK?
Right.
And they would deliberately not commit crime on a particular patch because they didn't want to go to certain police stations. Likewise, they didn't want to be targeted by certain squads who had reputations for catching people and convicting them. So I think Viper, short, snappy, to the point, is a really good word to be circulating in amongst criminals to strike just a slight note of fear. But now, of course, on this, it's Friday, so I'll be going for a curry tonight, you know, and what I would normally have a pint of Cobra, right?
Oh, yeah.
Other lagers are available.
Absolutely, yeah.
But I'm going to have to say to my friend who runs the Indian restaurant that I think I'll have a pint of limbless reptile beer, please.
Limbless reptile beer, 100%. You can't possibly have a pint of Cobra. No, I mean, it would be a bang out of order, that, actually, and it's offensive and it's an aggressive drink, 100%. But why is this culture now streaming through our police force where, I mean, instead of maybe looking at some pretty lawless areas and violent knife crime and drug crime and all of this stuff, there is any focus whatsoever on whether or not the name for the group of people who go out and sometimes shoot the worst human beings in our society should be changed because it's too aggressive?
Be under no illusion. Tough, violent, determined criminals need tough, bright, intelligent, fearless police officers and detectives to catch them. There is a fluffiness around much of the Metropolitan Police, and there is a sort of neoliberal orthodoxy that occupies a lot of the corridors of power in policing. And this has been borne out in recent decades as so many of these senior police officers have gone to university. And this dates back to 1997, when Tony Blair said education, 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 and certain cops said, we'll have some of that. And off they went, often publicly funded, to get their degrees, went to university, and they came back with their heads full, quite often, of pseudo-intellectual claptrap that really didn't have a place in policing. That's not to say policing has got to be disrespectful. Of course not. Absolutely not. And I'm not saying that policing should be occupied by dinosaurs and outdated thinking. But there is a limit, and sometimes, you know, a sharp, to the point, very, very relevant name is good.
Well, yeah, because what absolutely hasn't changed is the attitudes of the people that they're trying to catch, and in some cases, unfortunately, kill when it comes to, you know, armed shootouts or whatever. And, you know, if you change the attitude of the police or the ethics of the police or the ethos of the police, and those very dangerous, violent individuals who they are trying to catch have exactly the same mentality, well, at what point do those bad people win?
Well, we are very lucky to have some very determined, resolute detectives and police officers who are willing to take up arms, who have considered whether they join the police and will accept that responsibility, and years of investigation should they pull that trigger and take a life. So we should be grateful to those good, decent cops. But I'm afraid in the corridors of power there is this prevailing fluffiness.
But where does that lead, right? Where does that lead? Because some people from certain quarters might be looking at this and going, right, well, that's good, actually, because the police have behaved appallingly before, or we've seen arrests at the coronation, or whatever all this stuff is. By the way, I think they're well within the rights to do that. I'd have happily seen them lift anyone who even, in my opinion anyway, looked as though they were going to ruin that big day. And there was a lot of police bashing that took place after that I thought was bang out of order, but we can leave that there. That's not what you're on to talk about. But where does this play out, then? Do we end up with a police force that is infected with this all nicey-nicey ideology and then just lawless Britain, or what?
Well, we all have to hope that the answer to that question is a fundamental no, because we need resolute, determined, brave, courageous men and women to take on the criminals. Some of these criminals, and let's not beat around the bush, have absolutely no compulsion about pulling a trigger and killing someone or plunging a knife into someone. So we have to have a resolute police service who will stand up to these people, who will gather the evidence, who will smash the doors down, put the handcuffs on and drag them off to custody suites.
Yeah, look, Peter, thank you very much. As ever, Peter Plexi there. He's a former Scotland Yard detective, speaking, as he always does, such common sense. Right, OK, Liverpool has been hit by Eurovision fever. Can I just say, have you? Because I certainly haven't, but maybe I'm a misery ghost, but there we go. Eurovision fever ahead of the final of the song contest tomorrow. For what it's worth, our act did previously tweet that she hated Britain, but... oh, well, there we go. But what about the rest of us? I went out and about earlier to find out what ordinary men and women on the streets felt about Eurovision. Is there anything, do you think, that could make you care about it?
Oh, if they played proper music, I suppose. I don't know.
Yeah. Do you happen, by any chance, to know the name of any of the acts?
Not a clue.
No. What is so appealing about it for you?
Oh, really naff 80s music, basically.
Do you care about the Eurovision Song Contest?
No.
No. What could make it...
Some decent music.
Do you care about the Eurovision Song Contest?
I don't know too much about it.
OK, no, that's fine. So you wouldn't know the name of the British act?
No.
No, OK. Do you think you'll be watching it anyway?
Yeah, I might check it out.
OK.
Very cool.
All right. Do you happen to know the name of the British act?
No.
No. Are you going to bother to learn?
No.
No. And what do you like most about the Eurovision Song Contest?
Really nothing.
I don't think it's based on talent. That's all I'll say.
No, I don't care about it.
Why not?
Because there's no good songs from there.
Right, so I think that settles that then, doesn't it? Eurovision is absolutely naff and no one should care about it. Moving on. Why are Brexiteers treated so badly by the mainstream media? Alistair Campbell tore into one of my former colleagues last night. Now she's going to get the chance to have her say. Alex Phillips joins me live on this show very shortly. I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back, everybody. Patrick Christys here on GB News. Now, the Brexit vote was almost 7 years ago, but Ramonas just won't get over it. And there was explosive scenes on BBC's Newsnight last evening as New Labour spin doctor Alistair Campbell clashed with Alex Phillips. And I'm just going to play you a little taste of what happened.
So all your lies about taking back control, more money for the NHS, sovereignty, immigration, the list of it, you've failed on every
I knew you
thing.
were going to come up with, the money for the NHS. Nothing to do with me, not my campaign. And it's very rich, a man who essentially was part of telling lies to invade a country, to accuse me of dishonesty.
I think you might have lost the argument there, my dear. If I may patronise you even more. Honestly.
No, that's it now.
Yes, I will.
No, that's it. No, that's it.
Yeah, it's not very nice, is it? Alex Phillips, I'm very pleased to say, joins me now. Alex is a policy advisor to Reform UK. Alex, great to see you. Thank you very much for coming on. I suppose, are you all right, first and foremost? Because he's not a very nice man, is it?
My old mucker. It's been a while.
It is. Look, what did you make of that? Because it was patronising. Some would argue it was quite sexist as well.
Yeah, do you know, I'm not the sort of person to go down the route of, Me Too movement and misogyny, but it clearly was intimidating and bullying. And what that clip doesn't really show is quite how aggressive he was being. In the moment, it was actually really quite upsetting. He goes on to huff and puff and blaspheme, and he in fact leans right over me and blocks me with his arm. And then he sort of, when the camera goes off him, he's yanking at his microphone and trying to storm out of the studio. And, my animal instincts kicked in, and I had the hairs going up at the back of my neck. I was sort of shrinking away from him, thinking, oh gosh, this is getting a bit hairy. In many respects, it was quite frightening. And when I then left the studio, I just wanted to get out as quickly as possible. He then sort of came storming up behind me, and production staff, I won't sort of name names about who came to my assistance, but were quite quick to run up the stairs, out of the gallery, grab me, whisk me away for a cup of tea and profusely apologise. And they were pretty horrified, actually, by his behaviour. And yet somehow, of course, in the mad world of Twitter, where this has gone viral, it seems to be a football match that, I might be wrong, he's, got to be right, and the whole Brexit debate has reopened. But there are good ways to have debates and there are bad ways to have debates. And for a man who claims to be, cute communications director, he doesn't seem to know very well how to communicate.
I mean, he seems to have one pretty obvious tactic for communication, which is, and always has been, just to bully people. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, bullying is a strong word, but it did seem like quite bullying behaviour. And of course, this is the man who basically came up with the mantra that a spin doctor's job was to invent the truth. I mean, the part of this living in a political post-truth era was very much an era that Campbell himself designed and kicked off. And you know what's fascinating during that debate, what I was trying to say, quite accurately actually, was that it was all about these 4,000 regulations that the government have found down the back of the sofa. And I was pointing out that 260,000 regulations exist in UK statutes. And he was trying to tell me that all of those regulations were voted on and debated by MPs, and that, you know, we had full sovereignty, which is just not even factually true. EU legislation actually cannot be amended. And as a member of the European Union, we had to just have it added to our statute books. And he knows that full well. This is not even in question. I mean, if we could have decided we didn't want to follow this rule or that regulation, there'd be no point having a Brexit debate, right? But he just sort of went into meltdown and took to shouting instead of actually discussing the issues. And, well, it ended up in near pandemonium.
Do you think he should apologise to you?
I think he probably should. I mean, what he did, I thought to myself last night when I went to bed, I was like, he's going to wake up in the morning and think, perhaps this wasn't the best way to conduct an interview and feel a bit bad. Indeed, he did. And what he did was apologise to Victoria Derbyshire, and then at the same time seems to spend most of the night Googling me and decided he wanted to double down on me and stir up some sort of hashtag FBPE Twitter pile-in. So he clearly doesn't show or feel any remorse, so I don't think an apology is worth much. But you know, it's interesting, the sort of strange cult-like behaviour of these people who immediately lean towards sort of drumming up a big head of steam and getting as many people as possible to join in the ranting and raving. It's like playground, really, isn't it? You know, oh, the group of friends now hate you, we're all going to pick on you. It's sort of like childish bullying behaviour.
But this all too often appears to come from the same group of people who call themselves all really nice and tolerant and lovely and fluffy and decent individuals. And I just wonder whether or not you feel as though there is some kind of really weird element of psychology which goes, if you are a prominent Brexiteer such as yourself, and if you are still fighting the Eurosceptic cause, that it's OK to be mean to you.
Well, this is why they put all the emojis in their Twitter handle and support everything that is the latest, you know, luxury ideology, because they do it to make themselves feel self-righteous and morally superior. And actually they use it as a disguise and a means by which to essentially be nasty to people that they don't agree with. And Margaret Thatcher once called socialism the politics of envy. I actually think it's the politics of people who like to bully, who for some reason feel that life's done them bad, or you know, a misjustice, or that, you know, they're being screwed over by some other faction, who see division everywhere. And yeah, I mean, look, you only had to go to College Green, didn't you, in sort of the post-referendum years to see all those lunatics at adult Glastonbury in their berets and their, you know, strange fancy dress, to realise that there's clearly a mental health issue with some of these people. But yeah, I mean, you know, it always takes a Twitter foray and they all sort of come out of the woodwork and pack together and act like utter lunatics.
Look, Alice, thank you very, very much for coming on. And like I said, I hope you're doing all right and that it's not rattled you too much. You certainly seem in fine fettle still. And I'm very sorry that you, of course, had to face all of that. And maybe your apologies in the post from Alistair Campbell. But we'll have to wait and see. But take care, Alice. All the best. Alex Phillips there is a policy advisor to Reform UK. Just reacting, of course, to that bombshell clip last night from Newsnight. Look, keep all your views coming in thick and fast. GBviews at gbnews.uk. Absolutely loads of you getting in touch. Left, right and centre. All, by the way, from the £1 million net migration prediction that's going to come our way. Apparently, net migration to the UK this year could hit 1 million. Patrick, to be honest, I am absolutely sickened by what I'm seeing right now. British culture is being frowned upon and destroyed, and that is a big part of it. It's not just the numbers, it's not just the welfare system, it's not just the housing crisis, it's not just our public services. Isn't it just this notion that British culture and our way of life is not worth protecting, and it doesn't matter if it disappears forever? GBviews at gbnews.uk. That net migration predicted target could be £1 million for this year, which I think is absolute madness. I'll have loads more than that, though, as well. I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners on TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I have walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, very good evening, everybody. It's Patrick Christys here on GB News. It's just about to go 5 p.m, which means one thing and one thing only. I have got an absolute firecracker of a final hour for you. So here's what's coming. Is Britain full? OK, these predicted figures for net migration for this coming year is 1 million. Who are these people? Where are they coming from? Where are they going to live? How is our infrastructure going to cope? And frankly, what does this mean for the demographics of this country, which I am concerned have already changed irreversibly? So we're talking about all of that and having a big debate on, is it too easy to come to Britain? Does this not completely destroy the argument that in order to get here, you have to take an illegal journey across the Channel? Clearly, if 1 million people in net migration every single year, that would imply to me that it's not that hard to get here. So we'll have a debate on all of that. Get your views coming in as well, of course. You can't call cons anymore. No, that's right. So our prison service is going woke. Our police force is renaming the Viper Squad because that group of police officers who target specifically armed criminal bosses, and sometimes has to get into shootouts with them. The Viper Squad name has got to be changed because that's too aggressive, right? Well, now we can't call criminals criminals, basically. You've got to call them people with lived experience. That's all of us, isn't it? I've got a load more coming your way, but especially this as well. So as people will know, flipping heck, as people will know, right, I am doing the Dream Boys. I'm going to be taking my clothes off and dancing on stage with a bunch of male strippers to raise money for the charity Mind, the mental health charity, OK? So if your mental health isn't already bad enough, I'm going to be showing you a picture of Nigel Farage, who decided to try to upstage me last night on his show. Nigel, no, leave it out, mate. Leave the stripping to me, OK? Right, I'll be back very, very shortly. Patrick Christys on GB News. Was not expecting that giant picture of Nigel Farage to leave up behind me there, but there we go. I'm a lucky boy. OK, gbviews@gbnews.uk is, of course, that email address. Get in touch. On a much more serious note, a net migration of 1 million people a year. What on earth is going on? Do you think Britain is full? And is it far too easy to get to this country? gbviews@gbnews.uk. Now, the headlines with Tatiana.
Patrick, thank you. It's 2 minutes past 5. This is the latest from the GB Newsroom. Passengers are facing widespread disruption today due to the latest round of train strikes. Members of the ASLEF union are walking out at more than a dozen train operators in a long-running dispute over pay. Tomorrow, RMT members go on strike on the day of the Eurovision Song Contest final in Liverpool. Further strikes by the union will be held on the 31st of May and June the 3rd on the day of the FA Cup final at Wembley. Rail Minister Hugh Merriman told GB News the strikes are disappointing.
We have been able to facilitate an offer which has been put to the union leaders. The problem we've got is that they won't put it forward to their members. Similar offers have been put forward to other members of unions and they've accepted them. So logic would dictate if the union leaders did the same, we could see an end to this action. And I'm really sorry for all passengers who have been disrupted today.
Meanwhile, Rishi Sunak says he's disappointed with the decision to block Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky from addressing the Eurovision Song Contest. The block is due to concerns from organisers that an address could politicise the event. The Ukrainian president wanted to urge the global audience to continue supporting his country against Russia's invasion. The European Broadcasting Union says it's against the rules. The UK economy grew slightly in the first 3 months of the year, but contracted in March, according to official figures. Growth of 0.1% was recorded by the Office for National Statistics in the first quarter. But in March, the economy shrank by 0.3%, mostly driven by a fall in retail and car sales, as well as ongoing strike action. Chancellor Jeremy Hunt says although the slight growth is a positive step, there's more work to be done.
Well, these are much better figures than anyone would possibly have predicted, even 3 months ago. And that's partly because of what the Governor of the Bank of England said yesterday, measures in the budget that are helping to help companies to recruit, tackle some of the underlying problems in the economy. But there is still much work to do. We still have inflation that is much too high. That's causing a lot of pressure for families up and down the country. That's why we've got to stick to our plan to get inflation down, to get growth up, and to get the economy motoring in the way that we all want.
The Archbishop of Canterbury has been convicted of speeding in London. Justin Welby was ordered to pay £510 and given 3 points on his licence for exceeding a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit last October. The hearing was held on the same day he made a rare intervention in the House of Lords, condemning the government's plans to tackle the small boats crisis as morally unacceptable. A Lambeth Palace spokesperson says the Archbishop was aware of the speeding offence but hadn't been notified it had gone to court. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer has insisted his party takes allegations of sexual harassment extremely seriously. It follows reports an internal investigation into one case of groping claims took 3 years to complete. In a separate case, a Labour MP has reported one of her party colleagues to the police for alleged sexual assault. Sir Keir Starmer is urging anyone within the party with concerns to come forward.
Well, look, I think all of these allegations have to be taken extremely seriously, and they are taken seriously by me and by the party. I do understand from my experience as Chief Prosecutor how difficult it is for people to come forward. That's among the reasons that we made our process completely independent, so it's not a political process anymore. But what I would say is that I encourage anybody to come forward and to feel that they're supported through that independent process.
Now, a man has been convicted of the 1992 murder of 7-year-old Nikki Allen in Sunderland. 55-year-old David Boyd was wearing a T-shirt saying, "I am unstoppable," during one of his police interviews. Until now, 30 years on, he'd escaped justice. Northumbria Police first prosecuted the wrong man, who was cleared after a trial in 1993. Royal Mail's chief executive is to step down. Simon Thompson will leave the role in October after 2 years in the job. The announcement comes just weeks after agreeing a deal with the Communication Workers Union, bringing an end to a year of postal strikes. He says it's the right time to hand over to a new CEO. Pakistan's ex-Prime Minister Imran Khan is to be released on bail for 2 weeks. The decision from the High Court in Islamabad comes a day after the Supreme Court ruled his arrest on corruption charges was illegal. The events earlier this week have sparked unrest in the country, with almost 2,000 people arrested so far. Imran Khan denies any wrongdoing. And astronomers led by the University of Southampton have spotted what they believe to be the largest cosmic explosion ever seen. It's more than 10 times brighter than any other recorded exploding star, known as a supernova. And to date, it's lasted more than 3 years. Most are only visibly bright for a few months. Researchers say these events are very rare and nothing on this scale has ever been witnessed before. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now it's back to Patrick.
Do you ever feel like we're being completely gaslit? I certainly do. This idea that there is even any attempt whatsoever to control migration into this country has to be some kind of sick joke. We've got what's going on in the Channel, but the net migration figure, so this is the legal stuff, OK, to the UK, this year could be 1 million. That's pretty much double last year's figure, and it makes a total mockery of that claim that leaving the EU would give us back control of our borders. Now, whilst it is true that 45,000 migrants arrived on small boats in 2022 and more than 6,800 have already crossed the Channel this year, let's be honest, that is just a fraction of a percentage of the total number of people who are settling in the UK every single year. And I just wanted to show you now how net migration has rocketed down the years, so we can paint a picture of how we've ended up at this unbelievably round figure of around 1 million. In 1992, when John Major's Tories won the election, net migration was 49,000. 97, when New Labour took power, 107,000. By the time Labour were voted out, the annual figure was 294,000. David Cameron promised to reduce net migration to the tens of thousands. But in 2016, which was the year the Brexit referendum took place, net migration was 369,000. And in the 12 months up to June 2022, it was 504,000. And now we are hearing that it could be high as 1 million. I absolutely do not buy, and I'm sick and tired of people trying to tell me that this is the real reason for it, that we've got so many Ukrainian refugees and Afghan refugees and all of these people, and that it's all down to illegal migration, or that it's all down to the amount of students that we take. It cannot be. Because when I look at these figures now, I even had the former Culture Secretary on this very show in the last hour who was saying to me they cannot square exactly who these people are and what sectors of our economy they are going to work in. If we had 1 million arrivals, OK, or 1 million net migration, that should be a great sign. That should mean we have no problem with getting enough doctors, enough nurses, enough highly skilled workers in this country. But clearly, that is not the case. And a wider point on this as well. Is British culture or British society not something that is worth upholding? Because if we are willing to just replace that for the sake of us looking just about passable on an economic spreadsheet, which, let's be honest, we're not doing now anyway, is that the price we're willing to pay? Really? I'm joined now by Sunil Sharma, who is the Chief Operating Officer of the Conservative Friends of the Commonwealth. Sunil, thank you very, very much. These predicted numbers are massively concerning for the whole host of reasons that I've just outlined right there. What on earth is going on?
It's a good question. I think it's just it's clear to see the immigration is clearly not being controlled in any fit capacity. It's worrying because you talked about it there, the strain this is having on our NHS, on schools. We're already seeing we're in a housing crisis in some ways, where there's a massive demand to keep building and building houses across the whole country, and this is just going to continue. It seems as if almost on every bit of grass we're going to have to keep building houses to accommodate people as the migration goes up. Our NHS trying to get a GP appointment is just going to get even worse. something has to change, and something has to change quite radically because these numbers are becoming astronomical.
We need these people to fill labour shortages. What labour shortages are these people filling? I don't understand it. There's no way that we need 1 million people every single year, Sunil, to fill labour gaps that we've got in this country. And I also refuse to believe that these people are actually contributing, all of them, contributing massively to our economy. Surely there is a burden here on the ordinary British citizen, no?
Definitely, and I think that's the concern. I think no one would have a problem when you have labour shortages, genuine labour shortages, in maybe specific fields where we need to get people from, highly specialised roles within this country. But when you're having these sort of numbers and we're seeing unemployment as high as it is, there clearly isn't a labour shortage of people that can go out and work in this country. And there's a good example of how we're seeing, people often complain about the lack of money in terms of the pay that people get paid. This is a massive reason why we see job salaries continue to not increase as much as they should, because a lot of these migrants that come in are more than happy to be paid a very small amount of the wage. And this is another contributing factor why people are paid, in some cases in this country, so poorly. And yeah, to the point of there's not, in terms of the labour shortage, I think another really important factor when it comes to this is how these people are coming into the country. Not all of them are contributing towards society in the most possible way. I'm sure some are, but when you're having this number of people coming in, you cannot say 1 million people coming into this country are all contributing to society. The burden of bringing that many people in a short space of time is massive, and I think something that our government really has to look at.
I just feel really, really sorry for a lot of people who feel as though the area where they grew up is changing dramatically and rather quickly around them. And I feel sorry for them because I think it's often quite hard to articulate the way that you feel without coming across maybe as a racist, right? Because there is a difference, I think, between actively not liking somebody for the colour of their skin or their religion, in which case, of course, you are racist or xenophobic, and having genuine concerns about the area where you grew up or you live or whatever, being unrecognisable from what it was, just the place where you live drastically changing. And Sunil, can you maybe sympathise with people's concerns about that when you look at the rate of demographic change in a lot of areas of the UK?
Definitely. I think sometimes, we forget what it means to be British in terms of how we should be proud of this. And if we're not careful, we'll lose that identity very, very quickly. And there's a reason why lots of people across England no longer can identify with the area that they grew up in. And a lot of that is because of the heavy amounts of immigration. Now, ideally, you want migrants to come in who play a really active role in society. They, assemble, they adjust, they adapt to the society they're in. But when you're doing at that large scale, it is so hard to adapt when you're looking at those numbers. And what seems to be happening on our side is we're almost adapting to a lot of these immigrants and a lot of these way of living. And I think these figures are just so uncontrolled. It's clear to see that something that the government doing isn't working, and that's why lots of areas are becoming unrecognisable from when people grew up, and they will continue to. This isn't going to stop anytime soon. And I feel sorry for people who grew up in an area, worked hard, had a good wage, and now they're living in an area that they don't recognise, that's not their area anymore, and that's, I think, very worrying.
I think it is, and you touched on a few different points there. I mean, the housing crisis, the obvious one, access to public services. But again, we're told that, there's this massive shortage and that we can't get it. And we're told to ignore the rapid population growth as being any kind of factor whatsoever. People who are desperate to sort the NHS out, people who are desperate to get to grips with the housing crisis, people who are desperate to get maybe, class sizes in schools at a more manageable level, all of this stuff, pressure on transport links, they always conveniently ignore the elephant in the room, which is that there's, in this case anyway, potentially a net migration of 1 million people in a single year, and no one can really be able to deal with that kind of rapid population growth. And I do think there's something quite dishonest and disingenuous about all of that. But I also just wonder whether or not we should be stricter when it comes to testing people who come over here as to whether or not they would be compatible morally and with their values with British culture, because we don't appear to be doing that, and therefore we're not preserving it, and therefore we will lose it if arguably that tipping point hasn't been reached already.
I think we're seeing signs that we're losing it already. There's areas in this country where I think you'd struggle to see what part of Britain this belongs to. And I think that is a massive, massive concern. People come to this country, the reason why people are so desperate to come to this country and move here is because of our incredible values, our history, our integrity, our values on democracy, and all these amazing things. And if we're not careful, we will very quickly, those things will diminish, and they already are. And I think what's concerning is I just don't think people are understanding the magnitude of when we're talking about numbers like this. School classes will continue to get bigger. Your GP appointments will take longer. We'll have much more of a strain on our economy. More houses will be built. That's the reality. And we can try and play around with it and say, yes, they contribute with their tax revenues, which is all very correct. But those 4 or 5 things I mentioned there are going to continue to happen. And there's no point in us sugarcoating around it. That's what's going to happen until we take this seriously.
They are, and I really do think as well that if our only solution to balancing the books economically is to try to just throw our arms around the world and go, please, for the love of God, come here so that we look a bit better on a spreadsheet, and then we don't look massively better on a spreadsheet anyway, and we've lost all sense of national identity as a result of that, then I would argue that is not really a price worth paying. But still, I've got to ask, obviously, as Chief Operating Officer at the Conservative Friends of the Commonwealth as well, a lot of people might be thinking, yeah, we really thought the Conservative Party would be the party to try to get a hold of this. And, I mean, it has got exponentially worse, hasn't it? And then they might look over at Labour and think, well, you're not really going to do anything about it. So we're stuck. Do you think that the British public have a right to feel let down, really? Because it looks as though the Conservatives, of all people, aren't really that bothered about protecting British culture or our way of life.
I think so. I think they have a right to feel let down. I mean, it's, one of the pledges all the way from Cameron has been about getting this under control, and it's just not happened. So they have an absolute right to feel let down. And I think you're right in terms of Labour don't really offer any alternative or any solution on this matter. But I think the concern will be coming up to the next elections, the next general election in particular. I think a lot of these Conservative voters just won't vote. I think a lot of them will not come out and vote because of how they feel about this issue. Brexit didn't happen purely on immigration, but that was a massive factor. It's been, we had the referendum in 2016. It's been 7 years. We've still not got to grips with migration. In fact, it's getting worse and worse. So I think the people of this country have every right to feel let down.
Sunil, thank you very, very much. Great to chat as ever. Sunil Sharma there is the Chief Operating Officer of the Conservative Friends of the Commonwealth. And look, when you look at these numbers, just in the cold light of day, and you still see that our public services are not being met, and you still see that there are gaping holes in our labour shortages, etc. It does really make the mind wonder, are we not being lied to a little bit here about exactly where some of these people are coming from, what jobs they are doing over in this country? And do you not feel as though you might have a right to look at the very changing nature of where you live and think, is this correct? Is this OK? Is this what I want? I suspect maybe it isn't. And certainly if I look in the inbox now, it isn't. British culture is being frowned upon and destroyed. There's no name on this one. I get on a bus from work every day and I don't hear the English language anymore, and I'm sad about that. Well, there you go. This is another one. Like you, I have absolutely no problem if people are doctors, engineers, other skilled workers, exactly, who arrive here by the legal routes and add value to the population, but this is not the case. That's the view of that individual there, and says, Patrick, this destruction of our culture has been in the planning for years. And it is hard to come to the conclusion that there isn't something very conscious going on about all of this. I refuse to believe that it is both simultaneously impossible to stop boats coming across the English Channel and also simultaneously impossible to have a strong, skills-based immigration system. I find it absolutely bonkers. And if we play the tape forward on this, I had an expert on demographics earlier on, he said that by 2050, the white British box that you tick at the census, if indeed you do tick that box, will be in a minority. And that, I think, should be a concern for quite a few people, just maybe as a symbol of Britain as a culture, as a society, in decline. Other people, of course, would say, well, that would show that we are now a rich tapestry of diversity. But I would hit back at that and say, that's fine, but is it a cohesive society, and does it all work? Or do we run a serious risk of, frankly, just becoming a nation of individuals or distinct groups, just living largely separate lives in a country that has not got a public service that can function. And I suspect maybe that's where we will end up. GBviews at gbnews.uk. Now, prison officers have been given crazy new guidelines that say they shouldn't call inmates convicts, believe it or not. I've got a few other names for them, but yeah, they want to go all softy-softy. I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
So Dubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
How is this for an example of the woke world we live in these days? Prison officers have been ordered to stop using the word convicts when referring to criminals. So civil servants working for the prison service have told staff that they should use terms such as persons with lived experience, which I think is all of us, isn't it? Or prison leavers, yeah, for ex-convicts. What is the world coming to, and will it actually make any kind of difference whatsoever? I am joined now by former prisoner Ads Khan, who is now a motivational speaker. Ads, great to speak to you again. Thank you very much for joining us right here on GB News. Would you be offended if I called you an ex-con?
No, I don't think I'll be offended. But, I mean, I think the word con comes from over 200 years ago. Maybe, you know, an ex-offender is absolutely fine. For people that are actually in prison, then the prison inmates. And if they're on remand and haven't been convicted, then just call them a prisoner. I think that'd be absolutely fine. But more to the point, I mean, who has the time to organise these meetings and go there and say, tell you what, we're going to sit down and discuss about prison. What happened to reform and rehabilitation?
Yeah, it's absolutely spot on, right? At some point, someone has decided that the most pressing issue that they have that day is whether or not to call someone in a prison a convict or someone who's leaving prison a convict. And you know how these things work, right? They'll have had hours and hours and hours of meetings. There'll have been charts drawn up about what's the least offensive. Meanwhile, we are not solving the problem of actual crime, are we, Az?
Patrick, meanwhile, Rome's on fire.
It's true.
You know what I mean? It's crackers. I mean, look, listen, let's put it into perspective. They're currently playing musical chairs. I mean, we've had, since 2012, we've had 10 justice secretaries. It sounds like all they're doing is time. I don't know who the prisoner is. I don't know who the justice secretary is here. I don't know which one's actually in prison and doing time, because they seem to have a lot of free time on their hands. I mean, Patrick, it's absolutely appalling. What we need to focus on, reform and rehabilitation. And if the ministers are so interested in the victims, right, and I'm all up for victims, I know they should have the day in court, the criminals should have the day in court, but if they're that interested, then why not focus on reform? Why not focus on rehabilitation so there's not another victim? Look, crime levels are going through the roof, right? There's victims, people in course with drugs, there's major problems we're having here, and that's and within the government. So what do we need to focus on? I mean, currently, the ministers, they don't know whether they're batting or bowling. They don't know if they're coming or going. And to be fair, I think what needs to actually happen, Patrick, is there needs to be a cross-party agreement from everybody and say, everybody gets involved, they sit down, take advice from even ex-offenders like myself, right? Yeah. Sit down and say, well, I'll tell you what, we need to come with an agreement that's going to be in place for the next 10 years. Yes, we'll make some changes along the way, but in place for the next 10 years, so we've got something to work on. Whereas when the Justice Secretary is coming in and they're turning around and obviously, they're there for a year and a half, they've got no chance of their policies working because they've not got enough time for them to come in. And then somebody else comes in and does the same. So we need a stronger foundation. It's like building sandcastles. I mean, it's like building sandcastles as the tide's coming in. It's terrible.
Yeah, again, spot on, because this is almost every single issue that I end up talking about on this show can be traced back to the fact that we've had several different secretaries of state for this particular thing, or several different ministers for this particular thing, sometimes for just months at a time, or in the case of one actual prime minister, just weeks at a time, which means that whenever they come in, they think, I've got to put my stamp on this, this is what I've got to do to make my difference. And then they're out on their backside within the next few months, so nothing ever gets done, and it builds up. But, Ads, what would you say to members of the public who think that, we shouldn't pussyfoot around calling people who are leaving prison, not prison leavers. We should call them ex-cons, because then maybe that stigma would make that person less likely to offend again, or maybe it might make people more aware of who they are in the wider community. How would you respond to that?
Look, end of the day, I believe that we should call them ex-offenders, right? We all make mistakes. I get what the public's point of view is on the matter as well. But one thing I will say is that nothing's getting done for rehabilitating these people, right? And these people have been called much worse. I mean, they've been spat on as kids, they've had cigarettes burnt on them, they've been abused as childs, and as a society, we don't focus on what's happened to them, we just punish them for what they're actually currently doing. And I feel like with support and with assistance, more can be done to help these people in terms of to reduce another victim on the streets, to reduce another stabbing, reduce another theft, reduce people stopping from actually, going and dealing drugs.
Just quickly, just quickly, because I'm going to have to go in a second. Were you stigmatised for having been in prison for, a fair period of time, or, for the nature of your crime, to be fair, mate? Were you stigmatised when you got out, do you think?
Do you know what? No, because I didn't let stigmas bother me. I was focused, I was determined, I was motivated, I was consistent. And look, in life, you've got to stay focused, because people would rather get even than get ahead. I say, don't get even, get ahead.
All right, Az, thank you very much. Az Khan there, who is now a motivational speaker, in case you couldn't tell, but also a former prisoner. I'll chat to you soon. All right, OK. Loads more still to come now between now and 6 o'clock. As it's been revealed that net migration could this year top 1 million people, I'm going to ask, is it too easy to come and live in Britain? Shouldn't it be a privilege? So I'm going to have a big debate on that, because I just can't get my head around that number. But there we go. And this will get your weekend off to a bang, quite literally. I'm going to show you how I got on when I danced with the Dream Boys. As I get ready to take my kit off for charity next month, I'm raising money for the charity Mind, the mental health charity. So yes, I will be revealing all very shortly, ladies and gentlemen. But first, it is your latest news headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Patrick, thank you and good afternoon. This is the latest from the GB newsroom. Passengers have been facing widespread disruption today due to the latest round of train strikes. Members of the ASLEF union are walking out at more than a dozen train operators in a long-running dispute over pay. Tomorrow, RMT members go on strike, disrupting travel to the final of the Eurovision Song Contest in Liverpool. Meanwhile, Rishi Sunak says he's disappointed with the decision to block Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky from addressing the Eurovision Song Contest. Boris Johnson's also expressed his disappointment, tweeting, "There's only one reason the contest isn't in Ukraine, and that's because of Putin's illegal war." The block is due to concerns from organisers an address could politicise the event. The European Broadcasting Union says it's against the rules. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer has insisted his party takes allegations of sexual harassment extremely seriously. It follows reports an internal investigation into one case of groping claims took 3 years to complete. In a separate case, a Labour MP has reported one of her party colleagues to the police for alleged sexual assault. Sir Keir Starmer is urging anyone within the party with concerns to come forward.
Well, look, I think all of these allegations have to be taken extremely seriously, and they are taken seriously by me and by the party. I do understand from my experience as Chief Prosecutor how difficult it is for people to come forward. That's among the reasons that we made our process completely independent, so it's not a political process anymore. But what I would say is that I encourage anybody to come forward and to feel that they're supported through that independent process.
The UK economy grew slightly in the first 3 months of the year, but contracted in March. That's according to official figures. Growth of 0.1% was recorded by the Office for National Statistics in the first quarter. But in March, the economy shrank by 0.3%, mostly driven by a fall in retail and car sales, as well as ongoing strike action. And Elon Musk has named Linda Yaccarino as the new CEO at Twitter following over 6 months of his leadership. Musk tweeted the former NBC Universal advertising chief will focus primarily on business operations, whilst he will take on the new role as Chief Technology Officer. The new boss will start her role in 6 weeks' time. TV, online, DAB+ radio and on TuneIn. This is GB News.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2459 and 1.1476 euros. The price of gold is £1,613 and 76 pence per ounce, and the FTSE 100 closed at 7,754 points.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News, investments that matter.
Yeah, welcome back, everybody. It's debate time now, and it's got to be on this top story. The Home Office fears that net migration this year could top 1 million, which is just bonkers, isn't it? So, if true, it would be almost double the previous peak of 504,000, making a complete mockery of that pledge to take back control, which was made during the 2016 EU referendum campaign. So, this does beg the question, is it too easy to come to the UK? Joining me now is Jeremy Hutton, who's a researcher at Migration Watch UK, and a stalwart of the show, it's immigration lawyer Harjap Singh Bangal. Both of you, thank you very, very much. Harjap, is it too easy to come to the UK?
Depends what category you want to come into. So there have been relaxation in the student visa schemes. There's been a lot more easier than what it was previously to get into. And we're sort of at the previous levels we were pre-2010. And also the work permit scheme has been relaxed. And in response to the fact that a lot of European workers went away after Brexit, or they were unavailable. So now it's become a lot easier to get work permits if you have a sponsor license. And in a lot more categories. Recently, we saw they've been opened up to the construction industry as well. So there's a lot more categories that have been opened up to work permits. Hence, a lot of this new migration coming in is actually approved migration via visas.
OK, all right. Now, I'll just ask you on this one, Jeremy, because from where I'm sitting now, this idea that it's so hard to get into Britain that you have to get in a dinghy and come across the channel illegally is absolutely rubbish, because clearly a net migration figure of around the 1 million mark after a year previously of 500,000 and a year before that of around 300,000 would strongly indicate that it is actually quite easy to just get here if you want to.
Absolutely. If you're willing to put in a bit of work and maybe get up some skills in a reasonably common profession, like in the construction industry, for example, or maybe being a web designer, then you can probably get a skilled worker visa here if someone will offer you a job. In some cases, you can actually get a job in the UK without any skills or any experience or any qualifications whatsoever. And that's if you want to come to the UK as a care worker. And there are numerous examples out there of people in quite poor countries immigrating to the UK, having not worked in care a day in their life. And I think that's a very good example of just how easy it can be to move to the UK. And that's why we have such high immigration.
OK, Arjat, when I now look at the people coming over here on the boats across the Channel, and I think, well, are they genuinely fleeing war and persecution? That is one thing. But then people go, oh, well, Patrick, you know, these people, it's the only way they can get here. And then I look at this second highest group of people coming across the English Channel now appears to be from India. India is one of the largest nations that we take legal migration from. Is it literally just the case that they haven't really put in any redeeming aspects of their CV, as it were, that would warrant them coming here legally, which is why they are coming here illegally? Is that just the reality of the situation now?
I think a lot of that is could be true, because what happens is the people that are coming from India here on the small boats have actually come into Europe already, a lot of them on student visas. And because it's a lot cheaper to get into a student visa into a East European country, rather than, say, like Georgia, if I wanted to get a student visa into Georgia, that would be cheaper to come to than come to the UK. So from there, they then get trafficked, or they come over and try and get here on a small boats. But Indians have always formed one of the top 10 groups of people coming on small boats from the year 2000. So it's nothing new that coming in. And like India is one of the biggest groups of people who come across legally as well.
Well, it's one of the biggest populations in the world as well, to be fair. So there is that. Jeremy, I'll throw it back over to you. So it would appear that it's quite easy to get here if you want to pretend to be an asylum seeker or refugee. It's quite easy to get here if you are an asylum seeker or refugee. It's quite easy to get here if you want to be a student. It's quite easy to get here if you happen to be the relative of a student. It's quite easy to get here if you want to work in construction. I mean, it is painting a picture of the fact that it is desperately easy to come to Britain, as far as I can tell. And Jeremy, I just wonder why we still end up having things like a shortage for GPs and for nurses. Are we being lied to about skilled migration?
It's hard to say. I wouldn't say we're being lied to, but it's certainly the case that a lot of people are coming in as GPs and all those sort of things, like you say. The shortages that keep getting shouted up in the news, they are being filled partly from domestic and part from immigration labour. However, it comes down to the fact that there's just so many people coming into the UK through these many, many routes that ultimately we're never going to put a lid on it. And ultimately, every immigrant that comes to the UK has to end up working. They create their own burdens. Sorry, I'm being very incoherent here. They create their own burdens. They might bring children that need schooling. They might need to go to a doctor's, and then they create more of a burden for GPs and that sort of thing. So it's a bit like a pyramid scheme. You keep adding more and more on top, and the foundations crumble ever more.
Yeah, I just feel as though at the moment Britain as a whole is behaving a little bit like a drug addict or an alcoholic, right? Which is where different pieces of your life are falling apart, and you put sticking plasters over it all, and then eventually it all comes crumbling down. And Harjat, do you think we are potentially trying to mask a lot of the problems in this country and economically on spreadsheets at the moment by just saying we'll throw our arms around the world and that will make us look a bit better?
I think if you ask the businesses, Patrick, there genuinely are vacancies there. And if somebody is willing to pay for somebody and pay them a wage and they're not a burden on the benefit system, then I don't really see what a problem with that is. The other thing is migrants actually get double taxed for the NHS because they have to pay tax from their wages and they have to pay an NHS surcharge of £364 a year per person. So if you're a family of three, you've got to pay £1,000 a year on top of what you're paying through the tax for your wages. So they do pay their way in that aspect. But what is happening is everyone has to work And what should have happened is, if we were going to send migrants away and become less reliant on them, that is not going to happen unless we train the British people to do the jobs which the migrants are doing.
Exactly.
And that comes from cleaners.
And
that
at
comes
the
from
moment, there's
security
not a huge
guards,
incentive
cleaners.
to do it.
Yeah, Patrick, that comes from security guards, cleaners. We don't have to go far. We can look in the GB News building. The security guards are migrants. The cleaners are migrants. Yeah, these are jobs which British people can do. So why aren't the British people doing them? Why are they so reliant on benefits and not getting up and doing them? And
Part
we
of
have
the
to look
reason,
at that.
Harjap,
Are
I
we
dare
just-
say, yeah,
is
but
that
part of the
true
reason,
thing or not?
Harjap, for it is that instead of people wanting to pay a lot of workers a fair wage in a variety of different sectors in your local coffee shops and all of this stuff, it can often be easier and cheaper to employ people who are maybe willing to work for less. And that is a problem with this country. It's been a problem with this country for a very long period of time. It's a problem with this country that I think a lot of people would be helped by Brexit. That hasn't happened. But, Jeremy, I'll throw it back to you now. A lot of people, when you look at these numbers, are concerned about two things: infrastructure and the demographics of it, i.e. British culture. Do they have a right to be concerned about those two things?
Well, first of all, they certainly have a right to be concerned about infrastructure. I mean, look at the housing crisis. Everyone in the country that's, well, below the age of 35 at least, is struggling to get on the housing ladder and is increasingly worried about their future. As a result, they might have less children, and that creates a problem of its own, which further down the line, people might say, then we need more immigrants because we're not having enough children, and which is a consequence of not having enough people on the housing ladder and making their own families because they can't afford it. And like you were saying, having mass immigration does have a lowering effect on wages. And when the government does things like lowering the skilled worker visa salary requirement from, it was around £35,000, they reduce it to about £26,000, suddenly you've got a lot of people coming in that are at the entry level. And that is holding wages down.
And this is what I'm saying. It's too easy. Look, both of you, I'm going to have to leave you there, but thank you very, very much. Jeremy Hutton now is a researcher at Migration Watch UK and, of course, stalwart to the show, immigration lawyer Harjap Singh Bangala. I was asking whether or not it is too easy to come to Britain, and clearly, across absolutely every single sector, it appears to be desperately easy in order to get here at the expense of, dare I say it, British culture and our infrastructure and a load of things. And that, I think, is a massive, massive problem. It is too easy. It should be more of a privilege. But brace yourselves, ladies and gentlemen. Now, I'm about to show you Nigel Farage as you've never seen him before. And if that's not enough, I've been practicing my dance moves too. Although Nigel gave his away for free, I am doing it to raise a bit of money for charity. I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now? Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Okay, welcome back, everybody. Now, here it is, the highlight of my show, which some would say is a very low bar, but here we go. Yes, I'm going to show you what happened when Nigel Farage decided that he was too sexy for his shirt. As many of you know, I am, of course, getting ready to appear on stage with the Dream Boys. They call themselves the UK's most famous group of male strippers. I'll tell you why I'm doing that a little bit later on if you don't already know. There is some fundraising involved, by the way, and it's justgiving.com/fundraising/challenge Christys, and you've already raised around £31,000. So feel free to keep donating, that would be great. But it might be a bit too late for me to take maximum centre stage, because Nigel Farage is trying to steal my limelight. If you haven't seen what he did last night, then you're missing out. And if you're listening on radio, count yourself lucky.
You know what I mean, and he does his little turn on the catwalk. Now on the catwalk, yeah, he does his little turn on the catwalk. Get him off, Nigel. I'm too sexy for my cat, too sexy for my cat. Poor pussy, poor pussy cat. I'm too sexy for my love, too sexy for my love. Love's going to leave me.
Oh, OK, all right. Well done, Nigel. It takes guts. It takes guts. But it's probably a good job that the picture's cut out just then. None of us wanted to say any more, did we? But if you're listening on radio, let me talk you through it. Basically, while Right Said Fred sang I'm too sexy, Nigel decided that he was too sexy for his shirt. Thankfully, we didn't see him go all the way. But getting back to the point of on why we just showed you that, basically, I am dancing with the Dream Boys next month to raise money for the mental health charity Mind. And I was learning some dance moves. Basically, I've got to do 3 parts, OK? 2 little smaller dance routines and then 1 solo. And it's going to be taking place 28th of June in Bromley in Essex. I'm raising money for the mental health charity Mind because we have a mental health crisis in this country. 12 men take their own lives every single day, and suicide is the single biggest killer of men under the age of 40. Justgiving.com/fundraising/challenge Christys is that fundraiser. And you, thankfully, you wonderful people, have already given us more than £31,000. But I want to show you a sneak peek. It's just a little preview, just a little preview of me learning just some of the moves with the lads in Essex earlier on this week. Ladies and gentlemen, Challenge Christys is back for one night and one night only. Now, anyone who really knows me knows that when I promise to do something, sometimes I do it. With that in mind, it's time to return to the Dream Boys.
I once was lost, but now I'm found. I couldn't hear over the sound of my own voice saying loud.
Hey! Oh, hello. How are you, mate? Good to see you again. How are you? Are you all right? Oh, here we go. Here we go. Right, for people who haven't seen this before, then, who are you? What are we doing?
Well, we are the Dream Boys, and you're here to be a Dream Boy as well. Are you ready?
I'm ready. Oh, I remember this. Yes.
You remember?
Okay.
Lovely.
Yeah. Look at this.
And it still fits.
And it still fits, if the hat fits. Right.
It still fits.
Okay, so what am I going to be doing for you then?
You are going to be performing with the Dream Boys during a live show that we will be doing. You'll be doing side by side with us
So right, just to start off, mate, so it is a live show with people.
Oh yeah, live show. Don't worry about that. Don't dwell on that. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Let that go.
Yeah,
just let it go. Yeah.
So you will be performing by yourself, doing a live strictly solo on the live Dream Boys stage, as well as choreography with the other Dream Boys. So we've evolved your number.
What?
And you're going to be doing part of a 15-minute routine, surrounded by all of the boys, and it's going to be all about you.
Solo.
Solo, yeah. By yourself, on stage, all about you. Just you and the 1,000 people screaming.
And the 1,000 people?
Yeah, the 1,000 people in the audience watching. We'll probably be sold out, so yeah.
Probably be sold out. That's good, that's good.
No pressure, sold out audience.
Okay, right, well, we better get to work then, haven't we?
We better get to work. So there is a lot to learn, so you ready? The hat fits, you look incredible, so you're halfway there.
Let's do it.
Let's go.
Okay, I like this. Look at this. Hello. Nice. You're recording already. Oh, well, there you go.
Just naturally got this.
Oh.
Patrick Swayze.
Yeah. Wow, look at this. That is essentially just walking, though. So this is the thing that I like.
Maybe said. Sorry, I know it's very early in the morning, but open your legs a bit wider.
Okay.
Yeah. Cool. So we've done right arm.
Yeah, well, just about,
so,
yeah.
Nice healthy stance, a bit of bending your knees.
Okay.
And we're going to do a little, follow me, he's going to weave that way. We just come here and we're just weaving around each other and you're going to make your way back to here.
So it'd just be one weave.
Y, M, C, A.
Yeah, I can't believe you guys do this for a living. This is great.
Well, Y, M, C, A?
No, all of it. All of it. All of the lights come on. No music. Okay, so over the course of the coming weeks, I am going to be showing you different clips of my practice session there with the Dream Boys. I can assure you it gets raunchier, but basically I do want you all to donate if you possibly can. And as I said earlier, I'm doing it for the mental health charity Mind, and it is justgiving.com/fundraising/challenge Christys, and so far you've raised more than £31,500, which is absolutely brilliant, so thank you very much. Thank you to David Hender, who in the last few minutes has donated 750 quid. David, you legend, plus gift aid of almost 200 quid. Wow. Thank you to each and every one of you who has donated. I know money's tight for people at the minute, and so every little helps, really, even if it's just a couple of quid. Michelle Dewberry joins me right now. Jubes and Co will be here in a moment.
In just a couple of seconds. Oh, that's me, that thinking
about
I
wonder what's put you in mind.
Anyway, I'm going to need mental health support at this rate. Seeing all these naked men, semi-naked men gyrating around last night, it was Nigel Farage. Did everyone see that? Goodness gracious me. I was so pleased that camera cut out at the moment that it did. I don't know what's going on in this world, but Nigel Farage, half naked, is not a sight that I need. Anyway, I enjoyed your show. I was listening in, but everyone, what a treat for your Friday night. I am up next. Don't go anywhere. If you need to go out, take me on the radio. I'll see you in a sec.
Hello, it's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office with your GB News forecast. For many of us, it's a dry afternoon, but there is a lot of cloud, and in some places that cloud is giving drizzly rain, mainly towards the southeast, with a little occluded front coming in from the east, and that's being carried by cold wind from the North Sea. Otherwise, apart from the cloudier zone towards the east and southeast, there's plenty of sunny spells as we end Friday. Scotland, Northern Ireland, Western England and Wales faring best for the clear spells. And it's here where the temperatures will fall, particularly overnight, with Northern Ireland and Scotland seeing some fog patches and temperatures down to the mid or even low single figures in places. Much of the rain eases away overnight, but we keep the cloud, and that cloud extensive across central, southern and eastern parts of England in particular as we start off the weekend. Some patches close to the east of Scotland, as well as the far northwest of Scotland as well. But although it will take some time, the cloud across central areas will tend to lift and break up, so sunny spells developing widely for Saturday afternoon. It's looking like a beautiful day for many with long spells of sunshine. Watch out for the high UV. And relatively high temperatures, high teens or even low 20s in the south and west. But those temperatures severely curtailed along the North Sea coast because it will stay misty here and we'll have this cool onshore breeze. Into Saturday night, it stays dry in most places. The low cloud will become more extensive again across eastern parts of England, and there'll be some thicker cloud arriving into Scotland and Northern Ireland, along with some outbreaks of rain by the end of the night. Here, a milder night because of the cloud cover, but there'll be a few pockets elsewhere where clear skies will combine with light winds to give temperatures into the mid-single figures. A bright start for northern England, parts of Wales, into the south. Low cloud across central areas clearing away once again. The rain in the north slowly spreading south and turning more showery as it pushes into the south on Monday. Bye-bye.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but